we're on. Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Thank you. And I have asked Commissioner Hinsey to give us a thought or legislative prayer tonight, so we'll turn the time over to him.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to share a thought and then offer a prayer. Today, the body of Brent R. Taylor arrived in Utah, and this morning in Congress, our congressperson memorialized him and thanked his family. And I just want to share a couple of paragraphs from the Washington Post that was published a few days ago. It says, Brent R. Taylor, mayor of North Ogden, Utah, father of 7, was killed in action while serving in Afghanistan as a member of the Army National Guard. Taylor, 39, was killed in an apparent insider attack after a member of the Afghan security forces opened fire at a base in Kabul, where foreign troops provide training to Afghan forces. The attack wounded another U.S. service member. Taylor survived by his wife, Jeannie, and 7 children who range in age from 11 months to 13 years. Brent's life impacted so many of us in remarkable ways, and we're grateful for the expressions of gratitude and sympathy that we received. We're especially grateful for the love and support shown to Brent's grieving children. As one of many, many military families to give the ultimate sacrifice, we also want to express our love for this great nation and pride that we feel knowing that Brent gave his life in service of his country. 2 other sections of that article. Brent Taylor announced his deployment to his constituents in early January via Facebook, explaining that he had been called to help train Afghan commando units after President Trump had ordered an increase in the number of U.S. troops in Afghanistan. He said, quote, "There are 3 great loyalties that have guided my life and everything in it: God, family, country. While I am far from perfect in any of these respects, I have given my life to serve all 3 of these loyalties whenever and however I can." In his last Facebook post, October 28, Taylor quoted Franklin D. Roosevelt, saying, "In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed, it must be achieved." Marcus Tullius Cicero was quoted saying, "The lives of the dead are placed in the memory of the living." And I think this individual, the mayor, Mayor Taylor, is an incredible example to our country. And with that, I'll offer an opening prayer. Our Father which art in heaven, we bow our heads before thee this evening and give thanks for the city, the community, the county and state, country that we live in, and ask a blessing upon us in this meeting and upon our city and state and country leaders, that they'll be guided and that we'll be guided to do what is best for our citizens and for those whom we serve. And bless that we can do so in harmony with thy will. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you very much. A very nice thought. Moving to our first item on the agenda, we're being asked to consider the proposed preliminary subdivision application for Jewel Creek Place, which is 3 single-family lots at 641 East, 200 South, and we'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. As indicated, this is the Jewel Creek, I got the right one, up here with the subdivision. I've got the aerial photo off of Google Earth up here of the area. It's a part of the detention bond. As you previously were backing up a little bit, you're reviewing tonight the preliminary plan, which means that they have come before you before in a conceptual. The conceptual plan is for you to give feedback on compliance with the city's general plan and with compliance with the city's subdivision ordinance and also compliance with the zoning ordinance. They're coming back to you with a preliminary proposal. It's a southern portion of the property. We raise a couple of issues associated with the property. Just formatting it, you have the Dual Creek drainage in the previous detention pond area. The replacement facility is up to what we call the Jurassic Park gates. That's the new facility. So this area is no longer needed for the flood control, but it does contain the channel for Dual Creek, and there is some usefulness for that channel and keeping that. In negotiations with the county, there's an agreement that the northern part of the property would go into city hands for use as public space, and the southern portion would be maintained to the county to be able to subdivide it and recoup some of the costs that they occurred in providing the new detention facility further east. So they've come to you with their preliminary proposal now. We're looking at preparing for the final subdivision plat and looking at preliminarily what they're looking to configure the lots, the sizes of the lots, and so forth. It's 3 lots. They're maintaining a much lower density than allowed by their zoning. So they'll take the 3-lot subdivision through the process and come back to you if pending your feedback on the preliminary plan with their final plat. Just looking at the property, what we raised in the staff report, this is fairly, well, mostly compliant with the ordinances of the city. So we don't feel at a staff level there is significant changes that need to take place from the platting of the 3 lots. What we do raise is this is higher side of the property going downhill towards the stream. We do raise in the soils report, the Development Review Committee talks about a couple of factors associated. One is the water table. The city engineer is requesting that as they go further into the process for construction of the subdivision, they install a vertical pipe to check over a period of time where the water table is occurring. What you can do is as you start to potentially build homes here, the creek is going to have a level of water and it can travel through and outflow underneath the homes if we don't understand where that water level is associated. And so the city engineer would like them to monitor that so that we would know where that water flow line is. And then what we do is we keep the buildable area of the home up 1 foot above that water line so it doesn't flood out of the basement and so forth. It's not necessary to have a full answer completely right now about where the water is. That can occur over the period of time. What's important is putting in a plat note that if this moves forward for approval, a plat note is a disclosure recorded against the property indicating that they have to maintain the property 1 foot above whatever that final elevation is established. So we are recommending that they work with the city engineer and our city attorney to come up with the right language to put in the note on that final plat. The other issue is it is associated with the channel, the 100-year floodplain. It's narrowed because we have the facility above, but there's still a flood area associated with any high flow under 100-year parameter. And part of the issue is the back of the lots are encroaching into where that floodplain and where the berm would take place to protect that floodplain. And what you have potentially is somebody likes a flatter lot than a hillside. They might dig, they might raise. We just want to make sure that all the excavation that occurs there doesn't disrupt the floodplain so it expands further into their property and into their home. So the recommendation is that they put in that floodplain boundary an easement on the back of the lots and an excavation clause that they've got to maintain that floodplain area. So whether they put in a retaining wall, whether they provide some other facility to do it is okay, but as they grade and change the excavation, we need to maintain the boundary of the floodplain. And so we'd like to see on the final plat an easement associated with that. Other than that, I don't recall any other highlights we made into the report. Again, the lot sizes, the areas, there's some undetermined, meaning the buildable area is not called out on their plan. Our minimum is 2,000 square feet. These lots are much larger, so it's by default larger than the 2,000 square feet. We just want those verifications on the final plat. But other than that, we find it compliant with all of our ordinances of the city. So we're recommending that you approve their preliminary plat and that you let them move to the next stage, which is preparing the final construction drawings and the final plat that gets recorded. And that'll come back to you for review before you would forward it to the city council. So our recommendation is to move it forward.
Thank you very much, Corey. Does anyone have any questions for staff? If not, we'll go ahead and take this opportunity to invite the applicant to step forward.
I do have one quick question. When you said they monitor the water table, were you talking about the county or the owners of the property?
It'll be the county, and the city engineer will finalize where that water table is,
Thanks.
part of their constructions.
I also have one question on 4, where it talks about the easement and the grade. Does it need to specify what the grade is, or is that language sufficient for right now?
That's the other part, is we'll have the engineer and city attorney just work out the details of how and what to be excavated, because our city engineer, Kevin, wants to be able to be flexible enough in the language that people can use their backyard but maintain that floodplain boundary, and there's different options. So we want to keep it flexible for the owner to use the back of the lot, but have specific enough language that's saying you're maintaining that boundary of the floodplain. So we come back with you with the appropriate language on the plat.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, now we'll go ahead and invite you to step forward if you'll just state your name into the microphone for us.
Thank you. My name's Tony Thompson. I'm the property manager for Davis County, and it's a pleasure to be with you here this evening. Just one note, if I may, your reading of Brent Taylor. Lived on a cul-de-sac with his parents, and he ran around with my kids as a little 5-year-old boy, so it's far-reaching his touch in this world that he's had. So thank you for his remembrance and his service to our country. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. Your staff, Mr. Snyder's pretty well explained what we want to do. We're read through the report, and we have no issues with complying with his recommendations. Your note on monitoring the water, it's going to be, and I may pronounce this wrong, a piezo tube is kind of what it's referred to as, a 2-inch PVC pipe that's dug into the ground to about a depth of 10 feet. I think it's a recommendation that your city engineers look for. Then we'll go there during some wet seasons and measure where the groundwater is within that tube and know exactly where that's at. The other issue, the keeping the berm in the back, I think a note of the plat is very wise on that, to put that there to maintain that berm. I mean, the energy that's going to come down during a flood event down the stream there is going to need that berm to disperse the energy and keep it in the stream bed so that it doesn't push through and cause your residents problems. So that's the last thing we want, is to have your public works hit a call in the middle of the night that the stream's coming through somebody's yards. They've got better things to do than that. So, but we can make those recommendations, work with your city attorney and city engineer to come up with the correct verbiage that's satisfactory to them and move forward with this. So.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Thompson? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter to step forward. Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Any other discussion? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the preliminary subdivision plan for the Dual Creek Place subdivision with the following directives, 1 through 6, as outlined in staff's report, and the suggested reasons for the action A, B, and C.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate?
Yeah, two quick things, just some housekeeping things. Number 3, directive number 3, a plat note, not a plate note, just to eliminate the E on that one. And then on number 4, an easement and plat note shall be prepared, and then strike and prepared. So we're just preparing it once, or we're not double preparing it. But, and that's all.
Good catches. All right, let's start with.
I was just going to say, any other discussion? I was going to just say,
Oh, yes,
I
sorry.
appreciate the use of this property. I appreciate the work that the county has gone to make this a mutually beneficial situation for the city and for the county, and for also listening to and recognizing the needs of the residents around this area who came out in support of this and gave some suggestions that the county followed. So I appreciate that, and for that reason, I'm happy to support this.
Any further discussion? All right, let's take a roll call, starting with Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And it passes. Thank you very much. Moving to the next item on our agenda. The commission is being asked to consider a proposed conceptual subdivision plat, which includes 4 lots, proposed to be 14 total single-family homes at approximately 196 East Chase Lane. So we'll turn the time over to staff.
And I'm going to recuse myself, so I'll
Great.
take a seat, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair and members of the commission. Again, we're looking at a subdivision proposal. We're looking at the first step of the process is your conceptual review. Just reiterating, the conceptual review is not a official approval application. It's a discussion item where you have a chance to look at what somebody's proposing, provide some feedback to them, including the Development Review Committee, an opportunity and a report to share any feedback and thoughts about the subdivision and its compliance with the city ordinances. So you'll look at 2 factors here in the process. You'll look at the general plan of the area. What is the future development expectations of the neighborhood? And you also look at preliminary compliance with the lot sizes and the zoning ordinance associated with developing lots for future homes. Here it's on Chase Lane. You see some rather deep properties associated behind some homes. They'd like to develop the internal area of the property. The idea is they would maintain the existing homes along Chase Lane, and they would install a roadway that is a cul-de-sac for the additional lots that will be created. They'll reconfigure some of their existing home lots, some of them make them smaller in order to accommodate the new subdivision layout. If we look at the subdivision layout, here is the cul-de-sac road that should be in your report. And you see the existing homes along Chase Lane, and then in the south end you'll see the new lots associated. The count showed 15. There was we just make a quick note, it's 14 lots because 12 is missing. Typically you skip 13 because that's the unlucky number, but they chose to skip 12 for some reason. So this would be 14 lots, not 15 lots associated in this area. Going to the report submitted in your packet, we'll just briefly highlight what we have found as a Development Review Committee. The first look is the general plan for the city. This is in the northeast neighborhood of the city. This is entirely a residential neighborhood. The residential neighborhood is slated for low-density residential. So when you look at what low-density residential includes two types of zoning districts. It includes the agricultural, which is a half-acre lot size, and that is a net acre size. You have to have a half acre in the agricultural zone. Or low density is also the residential low zone. Residential low zone typically is 4 units an acre, so people associate it with a quarter acre lots. That's not necessarily true. It's quarter acre, it's 4 units an acre gross, and that includes the land that gets dedicated in a street to the city. So it will net out slightly less than quarter acre lots in its total. That's the balance between the former R18 zone, which was 8,000 square foot lots, and the R110 zone, which was the 10,000 square lots. We allow flexibility with the gross acreage, so lot sizes can vary. There's a couple of purposes of our ordinance doing a gross density is the modernization to a gross density allows the terrain and flexibility to occur on the lot sizes for a couple of reasons. Example that would be on a cul-de-sac. Often the deeper cul-de-sac lots are value higher in the marketplace, and the corner lots associated onto a collector arterial value lower sometimes. And we allow that flexibility so that you can have larger lots deep into the cul-de-sac if you choose, and a little smaller lots against the arterial if you choose. And the purpose is to get a variety of lot sizes and a variety of housing. And the idea of a variety of housing is to allow the market to flex a little bit and have a house that might be a little more affordable than on the corner than a home deep into the cul-de-sac. Today's market, as tight as it is, it's all fairly expensive, probably. So we probably won't see a great variation in price per se, but it is a low density neighborhood. So they are currently zoned RL, so they're asking to execute that RL zoning at a gross density of 4 units an acre. So we go through and talk about the lot sizes for the RL zone. Generally, we believe that it meets the RL zone requirements. We raised some detail issues associated with the lots, particularly like the street front side. There's an existing home on the current road layout that would be less than 20 feet on a corner lot that would be required. So the road needs to shift a little bit to make up to get to that 20 feet for a corner lot. The other thing that we raise is a setback. Driving out to the site, the home probably meets the setback on the plan. It doesn't measure out meeting the setback, meaning you can't tell where the line of the house is. So we just raised that there needs to be a minimum of 8 feet for that particular lot. We don't have yet from them the 2,000 square foot build pad. It seems from our perspective, the size of the lots will get to the minimum 2,000 square foot pad, so we don't believe there's a significant problem with that. We do raise that there is a rather small lot within the subdivision that's a little over 6,000 square feet. That will make that lot a little bit tight in the sense of getting the 2,000 square foot pad site for the home. I think if you measure it out, you need a minimum 5,800 square foot lot, so long as other lots balance out the 4 units per acre. So we just raised that. Might be a little tight to get the 2,000 square foot in there, but they might be able to make it on that one lot. The other issue that we raised, it's a minor issue from our standpoint. Try to get to the, where was the plat proposed? Oh, that's the wrong one, isn't it? That's Dual Creek. There's Barris. So this lot, that was lot 9 we talked about. If you look at the lot lines between 11 and 13 or 11 and 12, you look for the lot lines of 5 and 6 associated with this deep lot of lot 1. Our ordinances say that that the side lot lines are to be parallel to the, or perpendicular to the street. You'll see slight jogs in those lot lines rather than being exactly perpendicular. Particularly on lot 5 and 6 and 1, that's just the shape of lot 1 that they want to keep for the existing home. So you'll have a slightly awkward line associated there, and also on 11. It's typical when you're trying to preserve some existing homes, put in a street to have some off jogs of the lines. The purpose of trying to keep them straight is to keep the dispute between the neighbors. Because if they jog too much, neighbors have a hard time understanding. They can usually find their lot line out in the street. They can find their survey marker on the back lot line. But if they jog too much between each other, it's a little more difficult to decipher, and often takes somebody to come in and survey. If you know your preliminary cost to ask somebody to survey is probably at least $2,000, so that can be rather expensive. So we like to keep them straight, if at all possible. But that's not feasible in all cases. So our ordinance says, hey, if it makes sense, the planning can recommend a non-perpendicular line to the city council, and then the city council, during their plat review process, will take your recommendation under consideration. Generally, from a staff perspective, these are not that drastic to figure out, so we don't find it a big problem to let them to move forward. Other than the typical issues of making sure that they have all the utility services and the capacity, they turned in a few of the sheets from our different providers. There's still some missing sheets to make sure we have power and gas and other types of services available for the lot. All the infrastructure is in Chase Lane, so we believe the services will be available. It'll just be making sure that they meet whatever requirements of each provider to install the lines and so forth for the subdivision. So at this point, we don't see anything that raises a red flag in our city's general plan or a red flag in the RL zoning for the property. So we're recommending that you consider accepting the idea, give them some feedback. We've provided some recommendations for that feedback, and let them move to the next step of preliminary plat, where we will look at the subdivision in greater detail. So we're recommending you accept it for now.
Thank you very much, Corey. Has the applicant given an explanation to staff as to why they jogged that property line between lots 11 and 13?
No, we just raised that in our report before it was sent out, so it's a good question to ask.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? If not, we'll invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. If you'll both just introduce yourselves to us.
My name is Kyle Honeycutt. I am working for the landowner, Roy Barris.
Yeah, I'm Roy Barris, and happy to be here.
We appreciate staff's recommendations. The last question between 11 and 13, that little jog, we can fix that.
Okay.
I think the engineer was trying to make a wider entrance into that lot, but I can understand the argument as to why we don't want those kind of jogs, so we'll take that out. The lot 14 is labeled 15. The distance there we believe is 20 feet, but we'll double check that, and on the preliminary plat we'll label that. We think it's 20, it's over 20 feet actually. And then lot 9 is a little small, and we have room to adjust that, make it a little bit bigger. Our goal is to 100% comply with the ordinance as much as we can. The only difficulty we may run into is with the existing lots up front, but we're going to make every effort to comply in that area too. So we appreciate your time and welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant?
Have you talked with the existing landowners about the accessory buildings and the issue that is brought up in the staff report about demolishing those?
Yeah, those will all come down.
Okay.
Yeah, we could put it as part of a standard subdivision bond to, they'll be the first thing to go, really,
Okay.
so.
All right. Any further questions?
No.
If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. So we'll go ahead and take the opportunity to open a public hearing and allow any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter to step forward. If you'll just approach either one of the mics, whatever strikes your fancy. If you could just introduce yourself to us.
I appreciate this opportunity, and I recognize the fact that this is developable property.
Can you
My
introduce
name
yourself?
is, yes,
Yeah, there
I
you
am
go.
Nancy Lawrence, and I live across the street from the proposed subdivision at 179 East Chase Lane. I have a major concern about the additional traffic that will generate through this subdivision. Recognizing 14 lots, 4 of them currently feed onto Chase Lane. So if we just focus discussion on 10 additional lots, I'm assuming that would be at least 10 additional vehicles, and most households have more than one vehicle. So just for an average, it would generate an additional 20 vehicles that would be coming out of that. And the points I'm going to make all relate to traffic, and I would really recommend that all of you or any of you that could would go look at that particular section of Chase Lane. And these are my immediate concerns. There would be 5 feeder streets coming into the collector of Chase Lane, starting with 4th East coming down. 4th East being the first, and then 250 East, and then Wilmore Circle, which would be almost directly across the street from the egress into this, or the ingress into this subdivision. And then less than a block, just a very short distance, is 1st East that goes south into a church parking lot. And the fact that it goes into a steakhouse parking lot, it generates a lot of traffic. So there's just a lot of traffic movement between 4th East and Main Street on Chase Lane. And to complicate that, there is no sidewalk in front of our property or my neighbors on either side. So the children going down Chase Lane to school are walking in the street directly across the street from where this subdivision would enter into Chase Lane. So it's just a concern about safety and additional traffic. The fact that the street has, I don't know the exact grade, but it is steep enough that in the winter, vehicles sometimes don't make it up the street, and so that presents additional traffic problems. And I realize that's seasonal, but it is still an issue, and sometimes those who live higher up on Chase Lane actually park on Chase Lane so that they can walk home. So, and the fact then that you're on a grade again creates speeding for traffic coming down. And I do appreciate that the city has a flashing speed monitor type sign there, but even with that, it's hard for that traffic to maintain a safe speed. Several years ago, we had a young driver come down the hill, clip off our mailbox, and go in just across the corner of our property and into our neighbor's yard, narrowly missing my children. So anything to do with initial traffic is quite a red flag to me. Another thing that doesn't happen a lot of times, but maybe a half a dozen times a year, if there's a problem on the freeway and they shut it down between Centerville and Farmington, lots of the traffic jumps off at 5th South and then comes down 4th East. They go north on 4th East, which dead ends on Chase Lane. And so then they come down Chase Lane to get back to Main Street to access Farmington. And when that happens, sometimes that traffic is backed up from 4th East down to Main Street. I mean, it's just a solid line of traffic until whatever's happening on the freeway resolves itself. So again, I'm just saying additional traffic is not the best thing to happen there. I think those were the main points. And I would suggest that to mitigate that, either decrease the number of lots, or if it were possible for them to provide another ingress, egress, to not feed everything out right there where there is no sidewalk. Because there's also a UTA bus stop, and I don't know which is directly across from where they're proposing their outlet. I don't know if that would be changed. I don't know who designates that, but there's just enough traffic movement that it is a safety concern to me. And then I have a question. I can't tell by looking here, and I apologize, but I wasn't quite, I didn't understand lot size, how these lots, square footage wise, compare with the other lots that are in the zone around me. I printed off a map, and most all the lots that are kind of normal, like on 250 East, I don't know how big those lots are, but I'm wondering if the proposed lots, and I'm sorry, but I can't really see on this or see how it compares to the rest of the area in general. So
we'll take your questions, and then at the end of the public comment period, we'll address any questions that anyone has.
Okay. Well, I think that's about it. My chief concern is just that it would present somewhat of a safety hazard with the additional traffic. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to step forward? Come on up to the microphone and introduce yourself to us.
Steve Mangle. I live at 1035 North Wilmar Place, which is just around the corner from Nancy Lawrence. I have lived there for 47 years, and my ugly mug is posted out here on the wall multiple times. I was on the city council for over 8 years. My greatest concern, I think she already expressed, is we're talking about an old section of town, and what we're trying to do is put more homes in an area that is smaller than what that entire section of town has. So my suggestion would be is to make those lot sizes the standard lot size of the old Hal Harrison subdivision and put that number of homes in there. If not, it's going to increase more traffic and more demand, and there is not a sidewalk on the north side of Chase Lane in that particular area where the road would come out, which therefore is allowing kids out into the street. And if you build all 14 lots as it is proposed, you're going to have approximately 28 plus cars coming in and out of there on a regular basis. But that would be my suggestion. To me, if you're in the old part of town, you got to maintain the old part of town as far as the amount of density that is contained within that area instead of increasing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing no one else step forward, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Corey, Ms. Lawrence had a question with regard to comparing the lot sizes in the subdivision to surrounding lot sizes. Can you address that question, please?
Sure. Obviously, the lot sizes for the existing 4 homes are those large, deep lots, and they do match some of the other large, deep lots associated. If we go to the Google Earth, the property right next door to the east, that's a deep lot. You see these deep lots that are associated off of Chase Lane. Unfortunately, I get to be the bearer of bad news. It's not half-acre zoning in this area. It's not acre zoning in this area. All of the properties in that area are zoned residential low. There's a few islands of agricultural, but almost all of the area is zoned residential low. A residential low is something, as of 2003, fairly new in the city. So to give kind of a perspective, the old zoning prior to 2003, when we talk about what it used to be in the past, residential zone ranged from R18, which was an 8,000 square foot lot, to R110, which is a 10,000 square foot lot. And so your typical single family zone was 8,000 to 10,000 square feet. That was your typical single family zone. Now your agricultural zone was half acre or more, but your typical. So a lot of Centerville's single family neighborhoods are built in a 8,000 to 10,000 square foot range. That doesn't mean every developer chooses that. If you go to Ford Canyon, that's a residential low zone, but they chose to do acre lots within that subdivision. Part of it was a geologic topography associated with the property and the available road access. So you do have varying degrees and get larger, but most single family zones are going to run between 8,000 to 10,000 square feet. So that's net out. That's about 4 to 5 units per acre. That's This subdivision ranges. The smallest lot is the one we raise, and I'm trying to.
Would you mind, as you talk about that, can you somehow, you're not a computer, it's very difficult to see those lots.
Yeah, you'll have to go online to it. This is our best. This is our best picture we can provide to you on it. This is a variation. So you have lots as great as 10,000 square feet. You have a 12,000 square foot lot. You have an 8,000 square foot lot, 10,000. Here's a 7,000 square foot lot, 7,005, 7,007. This is the 5920 on lot 9 that we said might be undersized for the minimum requirements. Most of the lots are ranging between just shy of 8 to 10,000 square feet. So that's pretty typical of a single family zone. There's a couple of lots smaller, and in exchange for that, they have a couple of lots larger. So you do have some variation in the configuration. RL doesn't require a minimum lot size. Some of the standards default that you couldn't drop below a certain size. But you could have a 6,000 square foot lot. You just have to make it up somewhere else in the development with a larger lot, as long as it balances out to 4 units an acre. What people really think about it, 4 units an acre, is quarter acre lots. Quarter acre lots are 10,008. So we're just under the net of a quarter acre size lot, typical of residential zoning in the city. This is the plan for the neighborhood. Their comment is maybe it should reflect more of what the neighborhood maybe lot sizes are. So if you looked at the surrounding area, we would have to create a new zone saying lots have to be, third acre, or lots have to be half acre. At this point in time, the city ordinances establish 4 units an acre. So they have a right to 4 units an acre, and they get to choose how they lay out the lots in that 4 units an acre. They're just under. They're like 3. What was my table? I forgot.
You said 3.8.
3.8 units per acre. So they're just shy of the 4 units an acre. So they're well within compliance with what's allowed under city ordinances today.
I appreciate you for addressing that question. Let's go ahead and give the applicant the opportunity, if you would like, to respond to any of the comments.
As far as that smaller lot, I think we can tweak it, adjust how the roundabout comes in and things, and make it a bigger lot. We want to have lots that fit the houses nicely. And then as far as sidewalks and things like that go, we're prepared to follow the ordinance and do whatever is required of us as far as sidewalks go and things. As far as the other concerns that we brought up about straightening out lot lines and things like that, we're willing to do all of that. We want to just follow the residential low zoning requirements and make a solid subdivision in that way.
With regard to the sidewalks, everything on the south side of the street where this subdivision will be has sidewalks along the south side of the street. It will go into the cul-de-sac and around and come out. There will be continuous sidewalks on that south side of the street where any additional children would live will have sidewalks all the way.
So on the north side, there's no sidewalk at all, but on the
Just-
south side, there
just
will be
on 2 lots,
sidewalks.
there are no sidewalks. No.
Yeah, if you look at the picture here, you can see that this is the subdivision area of the homes, and you can see that on the north side, there's some missing sidewalk.
I see.
But there are sidewalks on the south side of the street.
So it'll stay contiguous on the south side, the sidewalk into the cul-de-sac and out of the cul-de-sac will continue to have sidewalks all along that south side.
Yeah. So just the best way I could describe it, make a comment on the sidewalk issue. This development will be required to install the sidewalks for the project, and it will connect to some existing sidewalk systems. If kids are walking out on the street on the north side, certainly that would be a cause of concern. It is a collector road. It will see an increase in traffic from this development, as well as when a freeway shut down and people use all the back roads to get anywhere, you will see that. And so, you know, I think that's a healthy discussion with those who own the lots and the city council over time. There are tools to install sidewalks. It does take cooperation of property owners to understand what those tools are and commit to those tools. An example tool, just one of them, is cooperation of the landowner and the city using its funds, its general taxpayer funds, to install sidewalk. Another tool is to create a district that funds the sidewalk, and lot owners pay for it over time. So there are a number of tools, whether everybody will cooperate with that. Unfortunately, again, I get to be the bearer of bad news. You cannot deny a development that complies with the ordinances because of missing sidewalk off-site away from the property. The issue of traffic, I agree with the point. Additional homes will create those traffic, and additional homes with lots of teenagers create even more traffic. And that will happen. This is a collector street, so it's designed to handle that increased traffic. Yes, it has some slope and issues of concerns, and those are additional discussions with the city engineer and the city council on whether something for that street needs further mitigation, further signing, further enforcement of those speeds. But again, bearer of bad news, this project complies with city ordinances, and so you don't have room to say, because you comply, we want you to do something different. Your role is to make sure they comply with the ordinance. If there are other mitigating problems that need to be looked at broader than their development at a city level, then those discussions need to rise to the elected officials to have a discussion on whether further mitigation is needed.
One thing that I might add is our subdivision will be subject to impact fees. Every building permit that is pulled will have to pay impact fees, which will go into the fund that the city has to improve roads, traffic impact fees, improve sewer, and all the different facilities that the city has. So our homeowners our future homeowners will pay what the city has adopted as the fair share for new residents.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, could I just make one clarification?
I'm sorry, the public comment period has been closed. Well, let's turn it, I guess, now to any further questions for staff before I open it up for discussion and or debate.
I have a question. I know that sometimes our city engineer has specific opinions on where streets line up, and the street cuts are on the street. And I know that we have a specific requirement from the distance between different streets. And I just wanted to make sure that the proposed site follows that requirement of, I think it was 1,000 feet?
No.
That's for major streets and intersections.
Okay.
Yes, the city engineer did raise that concern in some of the discussions. There's very little room for adjustment And so it is part of the default that's going to take place. It doesn't violate a specific standard that he mentioned
Okay.
in our review of it. But if we had a larger capacity street intersecting on a road, then there are some standards for where collectors and locals meet. But these are local streets, and you try to line them up, but you don't always necessarily line them up. The advantage of a cul-de-sac, though, just to pitch for the cul-de-sac, snowplow drivers hate cul-de-sacs.
I know.
But just for a pitch of a cul-de-sac, if we had a connecting street, it would occur further to the east to these other properties and you can see that somebody else is using their back area for a nice building in the back, and unfortunately that property owner is not interested in selling, and so connecting the streets not feasible. But you would add connecting to the streets, getting a secondary access would add more development. This actually makes it more difficult for the other larger properties to develop in the future, which will be an interesting discussion sometime down the road.
Corey, there were some concerns raised about the number of cars that will be added to this. Personally, I don't think that 14 homes is going to add a significant number of traffic onto a collector street, but I am sensitive to that concern. Is that something that you
And really,
and
it's only
staff have
10, actually,
tucked it?
because there's 4
That's
existing.
four
true.
existing.
4 existing, so 10,
10 additional homes.
properties. But I think that it is something that is a good comment and worth raising with the city engineer if that's something that hasn't been raised with him before, just to assuage neighbors that, if that is going to create a problem, I think that it's worth looking at.
Certainly, it's my experience with the 10 additional lots that you will not find a traffic engineer with 1000 North or Chase Lane that will come up with saying it impacts and there's something to be mitigated. That's just my experience that there's not enough being generated here to create an impact. What the city engineer would look at is turn movements and location of curb cuts and so forth associated with the traffic flow, and that's where you would get comment from a traffic engineer. Our city engineer didn't raise the issue of moving to a traffic study. I don't want to say it's an out because we're just at conceptual. Maybe feedback from this meeting, and then as we take back and discuss for preliminary, we can have that discussion. I can say though, with subdivision development, there's not a standard to initiate a traffic study. So staff, the commission, even the city council can't enact a traffic study as a subdivision requirement.
Sure, and I'm not necessarily proposing a traffic study. I just think that it's a valid concern, and I think that it's worth at least
Yeah, I think what we
raising.
could do is do the design capacity of Chase Lane and get the daily counts that are associated with that we can get off of the annual reports and give you what the capacity of the street is. It's going to be, the capacity of the street is much larger than the traffic that's being generated there. Unfortunately, the capacity of a street also leads to frustration because others are used to having a more free-flowing street than the design capacity. So the capacity is there, likely there. It will create delays, and that delays will be abnormal to the current experience, but it won't be over capacity of the street. It just simply raises the notch towards the capacity of the street.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. I just think if I were a neighbor, it
Yeah.
would make me feel,
No,
it would
we
give
can,
me some comfort if you
bring
raised
that
it
up
with
just
an
so
expert.
that everybody,
Sure.
understands where that level of capacity is.
So Corey, well, 2 things. One, Corey, first of all, Chase Lane is a local street, not a collector. Is that
It's
correct?
on our general plan map as a collector street.
Oh, it is a collector?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a residential collector in this case.
So then back to Becky's point about conflicting or not misaligned streets, that doesn't apply on these collectors?
Not on a local collector, you're not gonna see that come up under our city specs.
Is Chase Lane, so remind me, obviously, we're not the street experts here, but 4th East, is that?
That's a collector,
That's a collector.
yeah. That'll be a major collector,
A major collector. Chase Lane is a local collector.
minor collector.
Minor collector.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to get everything straight here. So, and I guess that brings up an interesting point, though, and this is, probably something that a discussion that maybe should have happened before now, but you have a major collector, 4th East, that ends at Chase Lane, and Ms. Lawrence is correct that the traffic a lot of times heads down Chase Lane back to Main Street. So you have a section of Chase Lane at least that essentially carries the same traffic that 4th East is carrying.
From Parish to Chase, it will carry that traffic. The rest of your 400 East
Main.
traffic will head.
From Main to 4th East on Chase Lane, it's carrying the same traffic that 4th East is carrying a lot of.
Arguably.
Arguably, yes.
I don't think you could argue it because Parish interrupts that. So there's a different amount of traffic occurring
Well,
from Parish.
okay, from Parish to Chase Lane, that traffic pretty much,
Yeah, and you'll.
for the most part.
Yeah, and you'll likely see that that's closer to, just my experience, I'm not an expert, but just my experience would say that is closer to the minor than the major from Parish.
So you, again, arguably then, you're saying that maybe that 4th East north of Parish should be a minor collector, not a major?
Functions probably more. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not
I
trying to
think
split hairs.
I think 4th East functions closer to the arterial from Parish to Pages.
Yeah. Okay. The other point that I had real quickly, kind of just addressing lot sizes, it looks like if you were to compare these lot sizes to the lot sizes in Wilmar, they're going to be somewhat comparable. Wilmar's average lot size looks to be about 1,200 square feet. There's some that are bigger and a couple that are smaller, but about, 12,000 square feet. So these are kind of there, maybe a little bit smaller than that.
A little bit.
Over on 250 East, which was mentioned, on the west side of 250 East, those are about 8,700 square feet, and on the west side of 250 East, the west side, those are 8,700 square feet, and on the east side, those are going to be closer to 10,000. So again, they're going to be about the same as that, so they'd be kind of comparable to the neighborhood there. And then on the back side of this, on the south side of this, there's the Briarwood. These look like they're going to be about the same as the Briarwood lot sizes on that south side, so they don't, they're not drastically different than what you can already have in the neighborhood. So, but this is another interesting thing, and kind of similar to the last issue where, and I'll just say this now and I'll be done talking for the rest of the time, but this is an administrative decision that, we were kind of left with. Does it check the boxes of the code? Does it meet the requirements, yes or no? And there's not a lot of room for us to have a judgment in this one. So it's an interesting situation, but it appears to me that it does check the boxes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I was just going to say any discussion.
I was also going to just say, I too have a concern about the lack of sidewalk on the north side of Chase Lane. I'm glad that was brought up, and I think that is a valid concern that we need to discuss unrelated to this application. Unfortunately, it doesn't relate as far as whether we can approve or deny this application based on the merits of the administrative decision. But I do think I would propose that we should schedule that as a discussion matter on what we can do as Planning Commission to address that issue, because I know personally I drive Chase Lane and up to 4th East for piano twice a week in the mornings and see kids walking in the street every time during just that little spot right there on Chase Lane to go down to school. So it's definitely an issue of safety, and it's definitely a concern for that area. So I think that should be something that we should address as Planning Commission, unrelated to this application.
I think that's a really good suggestion. I think that's something, if we could make a note to bring it up at another commission meeting, that would be great.
I'd be willing, maybe it's jumping the gun, but we could talk to the city engineer, look at what the right-of-way is and see if there's room to put improvements within the existing right-of-way, or would there be a taking of property. I don't think as a commission you have much to do from your toolkit,
right,
as much as you have been notified of an issue that you could understand what that issue is, and then, send up your feedback to the city council for them to address how much they want to take on that.
How about, could
resolving that matter.
Could we send it up and have a date by which we get a reply or something like that?
Second.
I don't know, move things along?
I don't think we can dictate to the
You
city
you've got some
council.
Can we
time.
put it on, I mean, can we put it on, you know, for them to, not dictate to them, but just, you know, put it on their agenda by a certain time?
Well, maybe let's just stick to the agenda tonight.
Okay.
If you'd like to direct staff later in the meeting, you can do
Okay,
so.
Lisa's-
perfect.
Lisa's
Sounds
cracking
good.
the whip.
Well, it wasn't noticed for the discussion, so I appreciate the comment. Any further discussion with regard to this particular application that's in front of us?
Yeah, I don't think it's wholly without merit. As you look at the long-term sustainability of cities and the financial situation of using existing infrastructure rather than building out additional infrastructure, as maybe a development would go out to a greenfield site that's not connected to an arterial, I think that this application isn't without merit. There's positives as well to doing development like this that utilizes existing city infrastructure. Just thought that should be in the record.
Well, and it allows the property owner to utilize their property per the code and per our ordinance in a way that gives people freedom to utilize their land.
Any other discussion, debate? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to accept the conceptual subdivision plan for the Barris Cove subdivision located at approximately 196 East Chase Lane with directives 1 through 6 in the staff report and suggested reasons for the action A through C.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, debate, comments? If not, we'll go ahead and take a roll call, starting with Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your comments.
Good discussion.
All right, moving to the next item on our agenda. Who do we, oh yes, and I will welcome Commissioner Hurst back. The next item on our agenda, we're being asked to consider a recommendation to the City Council on zoning text amendments to CZC 12.12 definitions and CZC 12.36 table of uses regarding proposed amendments to the table of uses in the commercial medium zone, which lies along Main Street from Parish Lane to Porter Lane. And we'll turn the time over to staff.
Okay, thank you, Chair. For the few of you who stuck around, I'll give a brief background. If you haven't attended our previous public meetings on this topic before, the Planning Commission has been discussing amending the table of uses in the commercial medium zone, which is our kind of low-intensity commercial zone on Main Street between Parish Lane and Porter Lane. And the commission has wanted to expand that table of uses, what is allowed in that zone, so we can open up the variety of businesses in that area and potentially have some new businesses come in. So over the past few months, we've held a variety of public meetings with stakeholders, including the property owners, local residents adjacent to the Main Street properties, and to the general public, along with a few other public discussions. And the Planning Commission decided on the following list in the staff report to allow these previously, well, currently not permitted uses and consider them as a conditional use permit. Allowing them as a conditional use permit would still give the Planning Commission the power to mitigate some negative effects that any new businesses coming in would have on the adjacent properties. So in the past, conditional use permits have looked at traffic circulation and parking and effects and noise and odor on businesses on the surrounding properties. And the conditional use permit can try to mitigate some of these effects that the use would cause. So by keeping them, by making them a conditional use permit, instead of just not permitted, gives the Planning Commission a little bit more control if there were any negative impacts for these uses. So on our last discussion, we discussed the following list, and you guys seem to want just a full CUP just to be on the safe side. going through them one by one, I did find just a few changes that I wanted to make. So I'll just go through the ones that I changed from not a CUP to something else. And the two easiest ones are park and elementary, middle, or high school. In order to be consistent with our code, those two uses are exclusively public facility. And so I thought it would look a little bit strange in our code if those two uses were public facility and commercial medium. So I just wanted to keep it consistent in our code that if those two uses were to ever come in, it would be a pretty obvious rezone to one of those public facility zones. With the exception to the exception would be College or University. That is currently exclusively public facility as well. But now we're seeing more and more that colleges will like to have a small off-campus classroom or something like that. And because there are so many suites or tenant spaces that are not its own property or its own building on Main Street, I thought it would be advisable to keep that option as a CUP so we wouldn't have to rezone just one suite or something like that into public facility. So if a college wanted to set up just an off-campus classroom like Slick has done in some strip malls around the state, that would still be a possibility. So that was my reasoning behind that, keeping the college or university a CUP instead of public facility. And in that respect, I also added vocational school to the list. This was somehow kind of just passed over like on I just don't think it ever made the rounds past the initial survey that we came up with this list. But in adding college or university, I also thought vocational school deserved to be added to this list as well. So it wasn't really talked about before. Also, somehow veterinary clinics also has been looked over, and I think that just didn't make it past the initial survey, but I did notice that we do have one there, and it does seem to fit in the other uses that we have on that street, and it is currently not permitted. So I went ahead and added that, even though it hasn't been on our previous list that we have noticed. The other two changes that I made would be to add in the definition of construction, sales, and service, which the Planning Commission has seen before, so it is the exact definition that we saw a few months ago. In the previous recommendation that we made months ago, the recommendation was for a permitted to this limited definition, but I did keep it as a CUP here. And that is basically the only definitional change between the not limited construction, sales, and service is the prohibiting outdoor storage. Last meeting, there was a possibility, discussion about adding agricultural sales and service limited, but after reading through the other definitions of uses on in our list, we have an outdoor nursery that is conditional use permit on Main Street, and we have a garden center, which is currently a CUP. And so I thought that kind of slicing and dicing these uses down any further was a little bit unnecessary. So I went ahead and instead of doing a limited agricultural sales and service, I just expanded the garden center definition a little bit more to include agricultural and landscaping uses. So we don't have like 4 almost overlapping definitions. So I just amended that instead, and that is currently a CUP in the CM zone as well. Restaurant, fast food, and bank and financial institution, we do have some uses in our table that just have footnotes in them, and I thought this would be a good opportunity because the Planning Commission noted that we are kind of done with drive-throughs in this area, and we wanted to keep open the possibility of like a fast casual restaurant or something like that, but without the possibility of a drive-through. So just adding in that footnote in the table that would prohibit drive-throughs, but with the use allowed. I thought bank and fast food are really the most likely culprits for those kind of situations. The only other two I did switch to permitted instead of CUP are secondhand store and cultural service, because for those two, every other zone that they're permitted in was just a permitted, and there were no other conditional use permits needed for them. And secondhand store, retail, specialty, and retail general are already permitted uses in this zone, and I didn't see a big enough difference between retail, specialty, and secondhand store that would warrant a CUP instead of a permitted. So those were all of my changes that I made to any differences by a conditional use permit. So there are two amended and one full adding of a definition, which is construction, sales, and services, the amendment of garden center, and then all of these changes in the table.
I really appreciate your thoughtful and careful analysis of preparing this table. Your work shows.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
It's fantastic.
Give her a raise, Corey.
Yeah, give her a raise, Corey. So
She's vying for my job.
one question for you, Cassie. So with regard to cultural service, which you've changed to permitted because you've indicated that there are other places in the city where it's also permitted, where else is cultural service a permitted use?
Public facility and other commercial zones, I believe.
And by
Because
cultural
the-
service, you're talking about like a museum?
It's museums, library, and I don't even know where this is actually used, where this use is actually in use in the city right now, but.
We have a museum right here,
Yeah.
and then a library down there.
Yeah, normally they're associated with a public facility. We substitute some of these public and civic uses with a specific public facility zone to classify them in. And I think Cassie sorted through the differences between a public school system and a college where you could have an extension office in a commercial zone. So I agree with her. The cultural services are allowed in the public facility, I believe, low zone already. So we didn't see that there was a significant threat from them, but you can always change it.
No, it occurred to me in looking at the definition that it's a place where they're looking at displaying, preserving, and exhibiting objects of community and cultural interest,
Right.
meaning it would be a place that you could potentially get a lot of traffic, which may require some mitigation. And so
Right.
it had occurred to me that maybe that was one that we wanted to leave as a conditional use rather than a permitted
Yeah, if we can get
use,
a
but
natural history museum, that would be great.
I-
There's a lot of artifacts down in the University of Utah's museum. If we could get the extension up here, that would be awesome.
I'll let you work on that, Corey.
All right.
Okay, so any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I had a question, and I think we talked about this last time, but I don't remember the answer now. Back to the schools, elementary, middle, or high, where do private schools and charter schools fall into that? So for a public school, we'd make it public facility. If it was a private school or a charter school, where would we go with that one?
You're going to look at a public facility depending on the situation. A charter school falls under the education system, so it's a public facility in of itself. If you're looking at an elementary school, it doesn't say public elementary school, it just says elementary schools, if I recall right, in the use list. So that's going to fall under the public facility. I think it would be, I'm trying to think of an education institution, because we have personal instruction, which is on the low-key basis, like piano lessons, dance studios, so forth. It would be a vocational school, a private vocational school, I think falls under industrial zoning. If it's a training school, it actually has to be an industrial zone, if I recall correctly.
How about that popular one in Salt Lake that's private school?
Challenger?
Challenger.
So if Challenger wanted to come in.
Or Waterford, they're all
Sure.
going to be,
That would be
they're all
elementary.
subject to the education systems, and so they're just gonna fall underneath that public facility.
So we
zone.
would call that public facility, and so it doesn't matter.
Same
I
with the
mean,
Montessori
we have an
school or
odd, I
something
mean,
like that.
I don't particularly care for the way we treat public facilities, because in some sense, we're just saying, wherever you locate a school, we just automatically rezone it public facility. They're not really districts. there's really not a district of public facilities. It's just, if it's this, City Hall, it's a public facility. If it's Public Works, it's public facilities. At elementary school, it has kind of an appeal of spot zoning in my back of my mind. You know, we take the water pump houses, and they're just these little pieces of public facility pump houses throughout the city. We don't really have public facility use district. We just take these kind of things and throw the zoning designation on top of them. It's kind of an odd sort of thing we do with our zoning, but 2003, they thought it was a great idea, so we've run with it.
Any other questions for staff before we start going through these things one by one? Nope, I'm seeing chuckling. All right, before we go one by one, does anybody have any global comments that they want to address? Concerns?
Yeah, two things. I don't know that it was unanimous regarding the elimination of drive-throughs on fast food.
Oh, I think we're going to talk about that
Okay.
when we get to
Great.
each one, or at least I plan to,
Yeah.
Logan.
And secondly, I just wanted to reiterate how much I wish we could just move these to permitted in a lot of cases rather than the safety net of conditional.
Baby steps, Logan.
Thank you.
I encourage you to make the pitch, though.
Oh, I'm
right.
Yeah, 100 miles an hour.
All right. Any other global comments before we start whacking at these things piece by piece? All right. Let's start with agricultural sales and service, which, as Cassie mentioned, instead of making that one a conditional use permit, she expanded garden center. So let's look at those two together. Does anyone have any concerns with what Cassie has proposed in terms of keeping agricultural sales and service not permitted and making a conditional use permit of the expanded garden center definition that she's proposed? Did anyone have any concerns with the definition that she has proposed with regard to garden center? No. I thought that was really an excellent idea, Cassie.
Agreed.
All right, so we're good with that one. How about assisted living facility? Moving that from not permitted to conditional use.
Just a comment, a convalescent center is already a conditional use in the CM zone.
Okay.
So think about assisted living facilities were generally back at the creation of the ordinance thought of as the beehive house that has 5 or 6 units and associated with it. And we put it in the residential high and the residential medium zones. Assisted livings have evolved since then. You know, we used to have the convalescent center and then and assisted living was more of a residential field. Now you're finding assisted living more into the larger facilities, multiple types of service, memory care, rehabilitation care, to also to assisted living of the elderly care. And so convalescent center is already allowed. So should assisted living be eliminated?
Why eliminate it?
Well, it's not allowed right now. Why is it eliminated when convalescent care is okay?
But convalescence, doesn't that generally, do we have the definition of that on there? We don't
I
have
think so.
convalescence.
I don't think it's.
But doesn't that generally mean
They have a staff nursing.
closer to nursing type of,
Right.
and then assisted
Nursing
living
home.
is more just,
But now your assisted livings are nursing care for rehabilitation patients.
okay.
You also have for the elderly, you also have memory care centers. So they've evolved to be not the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units for the elderly who's able to, you know, manage their daily needs. Assisted living has morphed into a hybrid of assisted living and convalescence care.
If we're going to allow college, universities, and vocational centers along that main street that'll get similar types of use, that one does not cause me any concern to allow assisted living facilities.
Does it possibly, like the agricultural use versus garden center, does it fit better under the convalescence definition and, you know, maybe add some language that includes, because he is right, like when you read that definition, it seems like it's a smaller, a residential facility. I'm just wondering if it's also one of those things where it would more appropriately be listed under convalescent center. Is that what you're trying to say, Corey? I guess?
Well, yeah, I'm
Wondering-
just pointing out convalescence is expected as a possibility already under the zone, but assisted isn't. But you have this new breed of assisted living which is closer to convalescence, but isn't fully, because it's a rehabilitation center rather than a permanent resident who might be a quadriplegic. A quadriplegic person in a car accident that needs full-time care goes to a convalescent center, not a rehabilitation. Your assisted living functions as a temporary convalescence as you heal and then are released.
And convalescence is permitted?
Is allowed.
Oh.
So I think you're right. They've broadened their horizon from our definition. We could try to morph it and combine them into the two, but I would leave them separate because the licensing requirements under the state are likely different.
Do we need to change the assisted living facility definition then to more closely match what it is today?
That wouldn't hurt at some point in time to find an industry standard to that definition.
That seems like a question for a different day, but a very
Yes,
good question.
Of course, I was
Yes.
saying, I don't disagree either, but does this particular, by limiting ourselves to the current definition that we have, I think that what I was thinking is more what Corey's saying, you know, it's rehabilitation, other things. It's a little different than what this definition is. I had not given that thought until he just mentioned that it really isn't quite the same.
And we probably ought to broaden the horizons with the definition at some point.
I just wondered if it hurts somebody down the road if they want to bring in what we all kind of view what an assisted living facility is by today's, I guess, other, you know, companies that we see doing that.
I think in order to advance the ball, I would propose that we leave it as it is drafted now, but if somebody wanted to come in and put in that type of a facility, they're certainly welcome to file an application to make an amendment to the definition if we haven't gotten around to re-looking at it between now and then.
Okay.
Can I call timeout for a minute?
Sure.
So, and you can tell me to just be quiet, but, so this has been scheduled for a public hearing. Would it be valuable to potentially hear from the public before we go back through these in case there's any input from the public?
Do you know, did I completely miss that? I apologize. Kevin, you are 100% correct. Let us take a pause.
That's why he's the vice chair.
It is, because he keeps me on the straight and narrow. Let us, before we continue to debate, let's go ahead and, it has been scheduled for a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing. We'll invite any member of the public to step forward. There we go. Fantastic. You are welcome to address anything that we have talked about, and we'll make sure to revisit the things that we've already talked about, so we'll fully appreciate your comments. If you will introduce yourselves for us.
Travis Shoup, current property owner of where the fire station is now currently located on Main Street.
Dwight Eaton. I'm an architect working with Corey. We developed some conceptual ideas for how they could modify and expand the fire station to fit their needs, which they would, but what we're hoping to do is show you what construction sales and services limited could mean as an actual building on Main Street, to hopefully give you a sense of why hopefully it will stay as a kind of conditional use.
So just a little bit more. Dwight's done some amazing work for us in terms of, and I think you guys have maybe seen the concept drawings already a little bit, but we've been to all of the public meetings, at least a representative from one. There's 4 owners. You've probably met 2 or 3. And we've heard a lot. My comment's always been, if we're allowed, the kind of investment we'll make is good for Main Street. And the comment always came back to the public who's not here is, what would you do to that building? And that's kind of why I brought Dwight to kind of present and comment on that, if that's okay.
So I have some boards for you. You probably saw in the package you already included, but I'll just go quickly through it. This is the site plan for what we're proposing to do. The existing fire station is right here. We're proposing to do an addition that wraps the existing building to accommodate what they're hoping to do in terms of office space and enclosed storage. As you can see, we've actually already calculated parking based upon the square footage that we're looking at. And depending on if we were to move forward, we kind of get exact definitions on how we consider each section area, but we're very close. If we would have to consider every single piece of square footage as just general kind of business services or commercial, we're 2 spots short. But we in looking at your kind of zoning, it says that we can also count if there's allowed street parking or along 100 South, which there is, we could potentially do a small reduction in the required off-street parking. So from that point of view, we're saying that for the most part, we can meet everything that's now listed in your current kind of zoning requirements for do modifications to fit within the traditional Main Street district and kind of the building kind of. What they're proposing to do is basically create a series of kind of offices and suites for them, and then the old bay of the engine bay, as well as this area, which is to the southeast, would become all internal storage. So they wouldn't have any construction equipment or materials outside of the storage areas. These are substantial enough that they can actually drive trucks in to load and then move out. What we're also developed with our programming is that we wanted to show both the chutes as well as the council that should the chutes ever actually outgrow this kind of facility, we could actually subdivide it into 3 retail spaces very easily, so that ultimately they could quickly turn it into a space that would actually be additive to Main Street and which Main Street kind of is looking for, which is just about 3,000 square foot general retail space. So this is the kind of project that we developed for them conceptually, and showing kind of the massing and scale of what we're doing. We followed all of the kind of guidelines in terms of setbacks, architectural detailing. We have shown kind of areas that could easily become or read as kind of commercial entries every 50 feet. And so what we're trying to show you guys is that ultimately for them as a construction services limited, they can easily fit within all of the kind of guidelines and design guidelines as well as building and zoning code guidelines that you currently have. It's just that they can't move forward if they don't know if they're going to be allowed to actually move in. So that's kind of the hope, is just showing you this is what construction services limited could look like on the property and in the downtown zone for you guys.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for me?
This is super helpful.
Who are you with? What architectural firm are you with?
I'm with Process Studio. It's my own firm.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I just query one question and feedback?
Absolutely.
The question I'd have is, there's likely, from my perspective, there's likely some concern about construction sales and services, not as historical uses, because we have that on Main Street, some historical uses. For whatever reason, unbeknownst even to me, I can suspect that construction sales and services was taken out. We're introducing something that's more of in a limited fashion. The concern I think that the public may raise, that might rise to the level of discussion at the commission as well as the council, is construction sales and services obviously have office, but they also have storage. And I think the sensitivity of the storage is a concern. Maybe you could address the difference between somebody like, I don't want to make it insulting, but a big D construction that has, hundreds of pieces of equipment, and a smaller contractor who has equipment.
Yeah.
What's the anticipation needs of a small construction sales and services for the storage of their equipment?
I think, the biggest thing that we're seeing, and in this particular case for the chutes, is that it's not really equipment as much as it's the materials, so wiring, cabling, boxes and stuff like that. That's all small equipment that is basically racked and shelved, right? They're not looking at tractors, they're not looking at, and honestly, in most other places, a company like Big D, or any of those contracting firms, their huge equipment is actually held in an offsite storage space, even from their commercial. It's actually done in an industrial zone, because that equipment, if they were at that scale, that equipment is so large, it would never fit really in the scale of the building to fit, let's say, any type of that equipment storage would never really fit in a property of this scale or in a neighborhood of this area. They wouldn't be looking for it, because they're looking at, right now we're saying that this building, even expanded, is about 10,000 square feet. If I were to work for a company like Big D and saying, we need to house all of our kind of construction equipment and large scale construction equipment, we'd be looking at, a minimum 40,000, 50,000 square feet to just fit equipment for like driving in and turning and stuff like that. So, you know, if you guys kind of can write the kind of CUP as limited and say, well, one thing that we're requiring is all internal storage, right? That's already a pretty significant limiting factor. The other limiting factor, particularly on the Main Street side, is the height requirement. The buildings cannot be significant, that tall. It's like a story and a half, effectively. And so, you know, I don't think you're gonna be able to, you're not gonna see a construction company come in and be able to build like a giant warehouse, partly because the way in which the scale and the kind of the as I reviewed your kind of architectural requirements, kind of limits kind of factors, particularly on the Main Street corridor, from ever having that significant of a scale building.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions we can answer for you?
Can I just make a follow-up comment? We appreciate and we're excited about I guess, the possibility of the commission. I mean, that's why you're looking at this, is how do we infuse something on Main Street, a shot in the arm. As a property owner, if my neighbor improves his building significantly, it's for the better good. It's a win-win, I think, for everyone on that corridor. With what we're doing significantly, it doesn't just increase my property value, but properties next door, and or an incentive for others to say, hey, look what they've done, why can't we at some point do something similar, or try to stop that decline and create a improvement. So
it makes me excited to see you guys bringing in this type of thing, because this is exactly what I would envision what we're trying to do, is to get property owners to think about ways that they can improve their properties. So
yeah, but we just wish, you know, we're not sure how to best go about it. Like one question I have, and I know you can't answer that in the public hearing portion. It sounds like you can't after. What's the timeline for the approval of this through the city council, I guess? That'd be my only question after that.
I'll just go ahead and answer that one, because I anticipate that we're going to send it up after today's meeting. So it'll go up to the city council, and then they'll get a chance to look at this issue. Is that correct, Corey?
If the commission chose to send it up, it would arrive. They have a 10-day notice period, so it would have to be a December council meeting. The December council meeting, just by pattern, they usually, in something like this, don't pass it the first time it hits their desk. They are uncomfortable with receiving something from the commission, hosting the hearing, and making a decision all on the same night. So it is likely, you know, 2 meetings at the council at minimum. And Lisa, they hold 2 meetings in December, don't they?
Yes. Sometimes they cancel the second one if it's really close, but I think this month that they'll probably have both.
Yeah, so, you know, best case scenario, they pass something in December. You know, worst case scenario, I won't say 6 months, but
we've been there, yeah.
But is, you know, January.
Sorry, one other thought or comment to that is, would something like this be a benefit at that same public hearing that the city council does?
Yes.
For us to come and for Dwight to come and
absolutely
present this. I mean, this is, I guess what I'm saying is this is appropriate. I was hesitant to do this, but if that same public hearing, because I know we're kind of on the timeline for the applicant to come, you know, to actually have a part on the agenda. That's why.
I'm going to go one step further and say, as a property owner in this city, that you would be well within your rights to reach out and contact each individual city council member and share the same materials that you provided to us with them, if you want to chat with them on an individual level in advance of that public hearing.
And the follow-up I have, that has been sent out through email, tried to contact, I've sat down with the mayor. He's ecstatic about what we're showing, but it's getting them to, I guess, want to meet with me, or it's in there, I guess we've put that out to them, so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thanks.
Yeah, really, really helpful. All right, Kevin, I appreciate you for keeping me on the straight and narrow. I will go ahead and ask anyone else if they'd like to step forward, and seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. All right, so returning to our list, You know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right to construction sales and service and construction sales and service limited, given that we've just addressed the issue. It seems to make sense to go directly to that. So what Cassie is proposing is to keep the larger definition as not permitted, but go ahead and add in this additional limited construction sales and service that would obviously accommodate the type of building that Mr. Shoup and his architect have addressed. So any concerns with the way that this is defined?
It's been drafted. I think it's been great. I think
Yeah.
it's awesome.
No, I think one of the things that I like the most about this one is that it says in there, activities which are conducted within an enclosed building. So we're not doing a lot of outdoor storage of large construction equipment. So we're putting it all inside, and we're going to be really clear that it's all inside. So.
I know
Remind me, this already went through our body, right? This limited, and we passed it up. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was not.
Controversial.
Yeah.
I know that that was a concern that Commissioner Helgeson had, who can't be here today, but that definition and the way that staff has drafted it also seems to address her concern with regard to storage, a lot of storage of equipment outside.
You know, and there's two things about that too, is first of all, the adding of that definition that is limited, and also what was pointed out, which was clearly pointed out by the architect, that just the design guidelines and the parameters that we have to work with within this zone make it sort of not feasible to have this giant, huge construction thing outside anyway, or big inside anyway. So I appreciated the thoroughness of that comment that helps us double take care of that situation.
I think that it would be worth emphasizing to the city council the practical considerations that will constrain that type of a use.
Exactly.
So. Okay, so does anyone have any concerns with doing what staff has proposed? Keep construction sales and services not permitted, add as a conditional use construction sales and service limited. Okay, so we'll leave that one. Let's go back now to where we left off on the list. So business equipment rental, services and entertainment. Propose making that one and not permitted to move it to the conditional use category. Any concerns with that? Nope. Okay. Fabulous. Moving to the next one. Car wash. Moving it from not permitted to conditional use. I have to admit, I don't love a car wash.
I really don't like it.
And I advocated a little bit for keeping it on the list the last go around, but I think I would be in favor of pulling that one off of the conditional use list.
I agree. If there's a demand and somebody wants to invest in it, let's let it come forward and listen. But I understand your comment. I truly understand your comment. But I think the type of economy we have, if there's a demand, let them.
I agree. I think that this is along the lines of we're hanging out that we're open for business sign and letting people come in and be creative with what they want to do for business. So,
but I think at the same time, we are approving, dozens of things that we are trying to get the shot in the arm for. That doesn't mean that we just have to say, yeah, everything should be permitted, every use is acceptable in this area. I think there are places in our city that a car wash is acceptable and is an appropriate place, and we have those areas, but I don't know that this is, for me, the place.
I kind of tend to agree. I just don't think it quite fits into what we're trying to plan, and I think sending just everything up to the city council doesn't help to convey like a plan that we have of what we think of how we want that to be opened up. So for me, I feel like it does not fit with the other businesses that I think we're kind of excited about opening it up for. So I guess for me, it's kind of a no too.
I think we leave it. They're going to have 20 more cars coming from Chase Lane, and they need a place to wash.
Oh, stop.
I think it was a quick quack.
Nice.
Quick quack. Quick quack, baby.
That's right.
Logan, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one.
I want this to go to the amendment debate motion thing and then let the chips fly there, so.
Yeah,
What?
I'm gonna star some of them that are. No, I really would love to hear your thoughts at this point, because I think that there are gonna be some that are close, so I'm gonna pull, just so you're all aware of where
Well, I
I'm
was
heading on
gonna
this.
ask that.
I'm gonna, anything that's controversial, I'm gonna pull out and do separate, so I anticipate doing one motion for everything that's
Perfect.
non-controversial, and then we'll go
Perfect.
through item by item on controversial matters.
Thank
So this
for
one
that.
I have starred as a controversial matter, but I really would like to hear your thoughts at this point, Logan.
Yeah, as I evaluate the count tonight and the 3-3 split, the initial motion has a lot of power. Is that right, Lisa? Meaning, what if an amendment gets tied 3-3? What happens?
It fails.
Fails.
Kevin, get ready to make a motion real quick. I'm in support of leaving it on there. Generally, I'd like to expand uses wherever I can. Where I'm so far personally from like a lot of you guys are on the edge with car wash. Like, car wash, maybe not. Construction self-services, that's good with car wash. My tolerance level is at a whole different place than a lot of you guys. If we were talking about like nuclear power plant, so I'm in support of leaving it on. That being said, I think our attitude should be, if we are comfortable with it as a permitted, we should use the same level of comfort with conditional permitted. Meaning, if you could stomach being permitted, then stomach being conditional, but don't think you're going to get a lot of extra protection being conditional.
I am going to say something that I should not be saying, but I am going to say it anyway because this is me we're talking about. If I want to play devil's advocate, I doubt that the city council is going to just agree to everything that we send up to them.
Yeah.
And so if we wanted to leave on one or two that we thought that they might strike, just so that if they strike them, then they feel like they've made changes to it and we'll pass the rest. I'm just saying strategically, I could see a reason for leaving car wash on, even if I think that it would make it past this commission. I question whether that one will make it past the city council.
That's smart.
Well, strategically, if we put stuff on that is so out there for them, then they may say,
Guys,
this is not.
we can't talk
That's
strategy
how I
on
feel.
the record.
It's like, well, if we just throw everything up there, they're just gonna be like, what did you guys do? Like,
You're not-
is there any, like,
that's
thought
what I
put into
think.
it? And I think we were putting a ton of thought into it.
Cassie put enough thought into it for 100 years.
I know, so I just think that one is.
Okay, I'm gonna propose that we leave this one as one that we're gonna come back to and revisit at the end and move on, because I really am conflicted about that one, I'm not gonna lie. I'm still not quite sure where I'm falling on that one. College or university? So Cassie has proposed going ahead and leaving this one, or to moving it to a conditional use permit in order to allow sort of the satellite offices. I think that makes a lot of sense. Does anyone have any concerns with leaving college or university on the list, moving it to a conditional use permit? No. Okay, great.
Can we talk about the other schools at the same time with that?
Yeah, the vocational schools?
Yeah.
Really good catch,
I
Cassie.
think that was great.
So let's also, as we're talking about that, let's also talk about vocational school. Any concerns there?
So the only thing I have a concern about with the schools, including college and university, is just the increased traffic, and I know that was somewhat of a concern with some of the public when we had our public hearings. I guess we kind of can control some of that through the conditional use process, but.
Well, I think the reason why I feel comfortable with both of those is due to what we were talking about before, the design guidelines and the.
It's not gonna be that huge.
It's not gonna be like you're not gonna get a gigantic satellite office or school or something.
That's true.
So to me, I think that those things will be self-regulated based on, the other.
Generally speaking, I think that's a fantastic thing for Main Street. I just wonder if that's, if there's a concern on the traffic there.
Well, for the community as well, right? I mean, like, for instance, if the University of Utah Healthcare Center right there was to go away, right? That seems like the perfect type of a place to put in a vocational school where, or, an extension of Utah State or the U or something where people in the community could take classes right there close to home. I think that would be an excellent use.
It would be. I agree.
Okay, so it seems like we're all okay with college or university or vocational school. I think that was it that was grouped together. Okay, so now let's go back up. We'll skip over construction, garden, and move to indoor recreation and entertainment. Insert witty comment here.
The arcade.
Insert. You did it. No, really though, in all seriousness, any concern with expanding this one to allow conditional use permit for indoor recreation and entertainment?
So Shaylin, quickly tell me what that is.
Like an escape, yeah, pool hall is, that's the witty comment I was waiting for.
Bowling alley.
I was waiting to say it.
Used to be arcade, a get out type of a room,
an
escape room.
Capital,
Are they
Bowling alley's another one. Think of a bowling
capital
alley.
T that starts with P and
Yes,
stands for
it's
pool.
Every bowling
Come on.
alley I know is
Bowling alley,
closed.
I know,
it's like
Every
great.
pool hall except for the pool table in my basement is closed, and that one's closed.
It would be a place where you could come play Pokemon cards. You could be like I shouldn't say this, my son, and sit like side by side with his friends and play video games together on their own little handheld devices. I mean, I think that it would be more along that line.
Would this include a trampoline park? That's what I thought. That's what I always
Although
think of.
that one would be tough with the height
size.
restrictions and the size.
Right, as I say, I think the size there. would
Dungeon and
probably-
Dragons though at the game store.
Yes.
See you there, Corey.
No, I've seen places where people are now getting together and playing board games.
Sure.
Have you
Yeah, I
seen
was gonna
these?
say, there's
Yeah.
a bunch of board game stores now where people.
Yeah.
Isn't that a Starbucks? Isn't that what we do at Starbucks?
I think it's a great opportunity to expand the area. And I can't remember who made the public comment, right? But wouldn't it be great to provide some place where our youth can come and gather in a
Yeah,
nice,
there was-
productive, safe
Absolutely.
environment? And I love the idea of opening something like that along Main Street.
I do too.
Okay, so everybody's nodding for indoor recreation and entertainment, so we'll leave that one. Mortuary, where everyone is dying to go. Any concerns?
You didn't even ask for the witty comment there. You just got
She
it.
already had one.
You were like waiting for that.
We have no place to bury them, but we should have in a mortuary.
You can have the mortuary.
All right.
To stack 'em.
Okay, mortuary looks like we have pretty good approval here. Outdoor recreation and entertainment. Any concerns with that? So miniature golf, archery, batting cages. I don't think
Karting.
you're gonna fit a drive-in theater in there, but
Go-karting.
Oh, go-kart.
Go-karts.
tennis courts, the pickleball courts,
Yeah.
what's that other thing, the cornhole?
Oh, yeah, people love that.
I can't believe that's a thing, but yeah, cornholing you could
Down
do
in
there.
St. George, they have 50
It's the-
horseshoe pits and have a tournament down there every year.
With holes and you throw beanbags into it.
It's that's what that, I've seen
It's
it.
a
I didn't know
thing.
that's what it was called.
Yeah. Okay, so any concerns with outdoor recreation and entertainment along Main Street? All right, we'll keep that one on the good list. Let's group parks and schools together, because Cassie has taken those out based on the public zoning. I'm completely fine with taking those off the plate. Are we all good with taking those off the plate?
Agree.
Very
so-
logical thing to do.
Very nice. Next, printing. General. Any concerns with allowing printing, like an Alpha Graphics or something to go in along there?
They're not going there. They just expanded.
Yeah.
But
Beta graphics.
Beta graphics.
Gamma graphics.
All right, looks like we're okay there. Protective service. So that's going to be
This would be
public
Gold
safety,
Cross,
emergency.
things like
Yeah.
that.
This be your private security?
Yeah, private security, your Gold Cross,
Yeah,
your private medical EMTs.
that does not strike me as being inconsistent with Main Street. Any concerns there?
No.
I'm seeing lots of nodding heads. Okay, reception center.
I'd like to see a reception center. I do know that that would bring more traffic though, and that would be against kind of what we've heard from the public. I think it would be a good place for a reception center, but
I would guess that a reception center would be a really beautiful building and
Yeah.
have really lovely landscaping just by nature of the type of business.
And probably more traffic.
Off,
only on the weekends.
off hours.
Off hours.
weekends
That's
when
true.
It wouldn't be like, I think the
It wouldn't be
busiest times are
consistently trafficky.
commuting, yeah,
You're
commuting
right.
school hours.
You're
so
right.
That one might be okay in that it's
That's true.
offset.
That's true.
Keeping it conditional would be consistent though with the idea of controlling
Yes.
noise and traffic and things like that that might interfere at night, but it seems to
Yeah.
me like that could be a compatible use. Research service. No, I don't know where we came up with some of these definitions, but of all of the ones to come, I mean, occasionally we have a very big broad one, and then we'll have this kind of little tiny narrow one, like research service.
Did we have some user in the past that needed the, like construction civil services, that kind of needed this use or something?
Do you want me to have an answer or tell you what really happened?
I'd really like, yeah, what really happened?
And now you've.
The 2003 zoning ordinance was a broad, whole, massive readoption of the zoning map, the zoning ordinances, new districts, and a lot of these uses were built somewhere else.
In another city that you copied from?
I believe that's what happened.
Not you. Oh.
Please use it generic.
You people.
You people, you planning people. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Well, does anyone have any concerns with allowing an establishment to go in that is engaged in industrial, medical, or scientific inquiries?
That's an appropriate conditional use in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No concerns.
There's one that Logan
There's a
wants.
few. Yeah.
Restaurant fast food. So I want to separate these two things because we have it as an asterisk with regard to drive-throughs. So let's talk first about it with drive-throughs, and then we'll talk about whether we want to limit the use of drive-throughs in the commercial medium zone. So I know this one, we had some debate the last go around. So let me hear your comments with regard to whether we want fast food restaurants along Main Street. Maybe it makes sense to talk about it with drive-throughs or not drive-throughs. Feel free to add in your comments,
Let me ask you a
whichever way.
question. What is Twisted Sugar? Is that considered a fast food?
Specialty retail.
Specialty retail.
Specialty retail.
With drive-through, and the drive-through is the more.
Well, the drive-through was by default what happened in the construction of the bank building that was there, but
If it started selling sandwiches and
it would
salads,
it would move into, this was the infamous debate between
Yeah.
Pizza Hut and Galaxy
Galaxy.
Yogurt when they moved to a menu. That was actually against their approval when they moved to sandwiches.
When Galaxy started serving sandwiches.
They no longer were qualified under the specialty retail. The drive-through is a default factor of the bank building.
Yep.
And so it's one of those areas that wasn't clean, if you lack of better terms. It was just specialty retail inhabiting something that was already existing in a non-conforming situation. But
In terms of the traffic, I think Main Street has the capacity to handle a drive-through. You know, I'm generally in support of having the drive-through as a conditional use there with the restaurants.
So I spent some time researching this recently, specifically the drive-throughs. And, you know, one of the arguments against drive-throughs is when it comes to pedestrians and cyclists and stuff, drive-throughs create, in theory, an extra point of interaction between a pedestrian and a vehicle. In this particular case, I don't think that's going to really be that big of an issue. For one thing, we have to remember Main Street is a state highway, so additional curb cuts, we could pretty much count those out. Like, I'd be really surprised if UDOT goes along and says, yeah, sure, there's a new curb cut, you bet. New curb cut here? And yes, we love it. I don't think so. And so we're not going to get those additional interactions between pedestrians and vehicles on those with the drive-throughs. And then the other part of it is, you know, one of the other things too is we want to make a lot of this stuff walkable, but we do need to still have, people have to drive here to get to downtown Main Street, right? They got to drive here. But as they're driving too, I think we want to also make it something that a lot of people are going to want to come to. Maybe some people are going to drive, they're going to park, and sure, they might want to walk. Got it. But you're also going to have the people who want to really quickly just drive through, get in and out. You're going to have the mothers with young children. They don't want to get their kids out of the car to haul them in, and then to haul them back and buckle them back in. You've got maybe some of the people who would really enjoy the Master on Main that don't want to have to get out of their car to go in and get back out, and a drive-through would be really great for them. And along those lines, we want to make it really convenient. The other part of it is too, and this comes up with the specialty retail, we'd already talked about this a little bit. We have specialty retail, and you know, there is a drive-through over here that was existing, but you could, in theory, create a new specialty retail with a drive-through, because do we want to get that granular with it? I don't think we do. A pharmacy, that would fall on here. Those a lot of times have drive-throughs, you know? And so I don't think we want to really get down to the point where we're trying to pick out every single little thing that could potentially have a drive-through and say, okay, no drive-through for this, no drive-through for that, no drive-through for this. I don't think that that's something that I don't think we want to get into that deep. We don't want to get into the weeds that far. And again, I brought this up, kind of maybe my last point. I brought this up last time we talked about this. I don't see a whole lot of additional congestion with drive-throughs. They are kind of like, they're self-metering, right? It's like your metered freeway on-ramp. You have somebody go through the drive-through, they sit, they wait, they get their food, they drive away. Next person comes up, they sit, they wait, they drive away. So we're self-metering it. We're going to regulate that flow to make it nice and even, instead of having 10 cars hitting the exit all at once and going out that way. So I think that we should allow the drive-throughs for convenience of our citizens, to let them, you know, do that. Let the businesses be creative in how they want to be creative. It's not really going to affect the congestion on the street, and the interaction with pedestrians is going to be minimized, because we're just not going to have that many more curb cuts. So
Thank you, Kevin.
yeah, you're welcome. I told you I thought about it.
I thought that you made a lot of very good points, particularly with regard to curb cuts. It's not something I had thought about. Any counterpoints, supportive points, any other thoughts about this one? Becky?
Yes, obviously, I do not support drive-throughs, and I still don't support drive-throughs, and I know that I'm in the minority, so I'm just going to vote no for that. Okay. That's all I have to say, because I've said it my piece last time, and I don't think it's the kind of restaurant that I would like to see on Main Street.
Do you have any concerns with the other two parts of the definition of fast food, though, allowing it so that it's not table service, it's sort of more pick up and go, and then
Nope.
it's in a disposable wrapper or container?
Nope.
Okay.
Just to point out one, so you make sure you fully debated the issue with the drive-through. The argument, I think a great argument, so it's the debate, but just the counter argument to the drive-through is if you think about, and I know it's controversial, but if you think about the design guidelines and the interruption of the fabric, you're going to have interruption with a driveway entrance and an exit. We try to combine them into one. But you're now adding to the building footprints that we require up, I don't think it drops below 75% of the width of the lot, and as high as 80 or 85% of the width of the lot. And now you're saying, okay, your building has to be this much of the lot. You've got to get to your parking, and then how do you introduce a drive-through without interrupting that fabric of the 80%? That's just,
Well, and
I'm not saying it's going to stay that way.
I did make some of these comments last time, and I guess I could still make them again this time if you really want to hear from me again. But I do think exactly what Corey was saying. I don't think you're going to get from the amount of parking that is going to be required for any of these places when you have a drive-through, A, that's going to interrupt the parking. B, I think it doesn't even match the type of design that we have. So I always say this, and so you're going to be annoyed to hear it again, but if we're supporting the plan by our little decisions, the plan will remain. If we don't support the plan, if we don't like the plan, then we should take the plan out, and we should make all these other yeah, whatever kind of ideas. But if we do value the plan and we've voted on that and we want to keep it, then we need to make decisions that support the plan. And I don't think that drive-throughs personally support the plan from a design guideline, from a spatial thing. I also don't think drive-throughs are a great thing to even though drive-throughs are very convenient, and I use drive-throughs myself, environmentally, I don't think they're a great thing for an area that has such poor air quality to just introduce additional places for us to sit and idle our vehicles in our city. Those create hot spots that are dangerous for people. There are a lot of things about drive-throughs and the types of businesses that we find generally with drive-throughs that I don't think are appropriate for the Main Street area. Lastly, if we're specifically talking about fast food restaurants, Centerville, when I tell people I'm from Centerville, they frequently notice that we have a lot of chain restaurants, which is super convenient. It's convenient for the people that live here, and it's convenient for a lot of people who don't live here. So if we're talking about traffic and we're talking about the type of area that we want to live in and we want to be around all the time, we are introducing people that would not be from Centerville, that would come because they notice that, you know, that type of restaurant they recognize and they'll come. So if I'm talking about traffic and I'm talking about the feeling of this area, to me it doesn't feel appropriate.
So I think that a couple of things on that. As far as people coming to the city, we want that. We want them to come spend their money here. We want their sales tax dollars. That's fantastic, right? That's one of the best things about Walmart and Target and Home Depot is that those draw in people from all over the place to come here and spend their money here, and we get that revenue here, and we get the benefit from that here. Great, we love that.
On Parish Lane, I totally agree with you.
Right, but still, I don't think we want to limit it, right? Why would we want to say we want people to come on Parish Lane, but there's this no visitors allowed barrier at the end of Parish Lane and Main Street? I don't think that's what we want to say. I think we still want those people to come even on Main Street and spend their money on Main Street. Because especially since the Main Street business owners are local business owners, they're local residents mostly, we want those residents of Centerville to be successful in their businesses. And sometimes
absolutely.
You have to draw people in from outside of Centerville to do that. So two things: one, obviously keeping Centerville residents employed, and two, having those non-Centerville residents spend their money here and we get the revenue from that. So I think we want that.
Well, and I actually completely agree with you that we do want these businesses to be successful, which is why we're doing this whole thing. But I do think the type of demographic that it brings when you have different types of businesses that are well known is not what I personally see as beneficial to Main Street. So, and when I say I don't want extra traffic, that's not what I don't want. I don't want the kind of traffic that a chain or a very highly drive-through restaurant would provide. But I do want traffic for the businesses to be successful, but not to be an undue burden on the residents that live near Main Street who have come and told us at these meetings that lots of added traffic would be a burden to them.
You know, Corey, it occurs to me, Kevin made a comment before that if we had a pharmacy along that street, it would be allowed, right? A drive-through along a pharmacy. It wouldn't be prohibited along Main Street, assuming.
I'm trying to remember the use list and where pharmacy versus banks show up, because we have that same problem. The drive-through became controversial with the development of the Target, and there was a lot of effort during Target and Walmart to minimize drive-throughs. We ended up with some of them, but they were trying to minimize them back in the mid-90s as that Target project developed. But a pharmacy, yeah, the pharmacy is going to be defined different than a fast food, and if it contains a drive-through, there's no specific drive-through definition, conditional or permitted. I guess
I was trying to think through other things that would have drive-throughs, like pharmacies or dry cleaning businesses or the drink specialty shop or a coffee shop or a Krispy Kreme donut shop, right? All of which I've seen with drive-throughs, and I think all of which would not fall within the definition of fast food. So if we're going to be singling out one type of a business to say no drive-through for that type of business, but we'll allow drive-throughs for everything else, I find that just, I personally would rather see consistency across the board there. But I really do appreciate your comments, Becky, because I think that the struggle that I have, it goes to the same struggle that I have with car wash, is that the type of character that we want along that Main Street. And I think that there is room for reasonable disagreement along that, right? It's
Absolutely.
just based on a personal viewpoint on that one. So I do appreciate, I think that you make some really good points.
So can sorry, I don't mean to keep monopolizing the time, but to a point that Corey made, and then also Becky, you mentioned as far as the design and the plan for the design. I think that a drive-through can work with the plan. What it'll do, of course, is it'll kind of push the drive-throughs more toward a corner lot. You know, you're going to have those drive-throughs.
The Cutler sandwich shop.
Like, or where the Gary's Dry
Yeah,
Cleaner used to be.
where Gary's Dry Cleaners used to be, perfect example of that. Actually, over here, the Twisted Sugar is on a corner, right? So you come in the one way, you go out the other way. But yeah, they've got some other things going on over there, but that's my point. So I think it can work. It'll just kind of push it to those particular areas that are more well-suited to that type of traffic anyway, right? So you're gonna enter or exit, I guess, depends, on a side street, but not so far up the side street that you're affecting the residential areas. So I think it can work.
I agree. That's a good point.
Right. Any other comments with regard to restaurant fast food?
We're just missing KFC and Burger King. That's all I'm worried about.
Well, there isn't even a Burger King anywhere in the area anymore, right? So
There's one in Layton.
wow.
Or no, it's Kaysville. It's right off the freeway over there by the Smiths. Anyway.
Burger King. Are they?
Okay, so let's move on to restaurant general. Any concerns opening this Main Street up to allow for restaurants, keeping in mind that there are going to be natural limitations on what can go in given the 10,000 square foot restriction and the height requirements? So we're probably talking smaller restaurants, probably more specialty restaurants, probably not chains, I would guess. Not that I'm saying it couldn't be, but.
Well, the issue is your overlay kicks in and makes it required as part of mixed use, so. That's a part we haven't discussed yet, but.
That is a discussion for a different day,
Yep.
Corey.
Yep.
All right, so any concerns with regard to restaurant general?
I just know Commissioner Helgeson would probably say no on that, and the drive-through. And I know that that's been a stick point for a lot of residents that are right behind where some of these might be.
Yeah. I get the perception that was based on, well, Corey has alluded to it frequently, the Domino's pizza
Just
issue.
that one site.
Yeah, but I also get the perception, and I'm no restaurateur expert, but that they have some really good technology now for cutting down on odors so that it doesn't impact surrounding residents as much.
Was Helgeson, was she against general restaurant or just drive-throughs?
It might have been just the drive-through if memory serves. I forgot.
I know
think
she
it was fast food. She
definitely
doesn't.
against fast food.
She says we have enough fast food.
She would disagree with Corey that we need a Burger King and a KFC.
She would be wrong.
As do I.
Scone cutter. Anyone want to make a pitch
There
for
we
a
go.
scone cutter?
There. Blast from the past for me.
All right. Wiener Schnitzel?
Well, that's really a blast
I
from
could
the
come up
past.
with all of these guys. Okay, moving on
Dee's
to
Family Restaurant. I'm sorry.
second. Let's move to secondhand store. So Cassie, I thought that your point about making that more consistent with retail sales made sense to make that a permitted use rather than a conditional use. Does anyone have any concerns with that?
No concerns.
All right. Shopping center?
Can I just say after that, I just appreciate that as a planning commission and from our residents, we don't have major public outcry from a secondhand store as other cities in the valley have.
And they're getting more trendy though.
Which is too
I
bad.
think the idea of, I've seen a lot of more trendy secondhand stores. I think that it's becoming a thriving area.
It's not a, yeah.
They would not.
I'll stop there, yes.
Okay, shopping center. Any concerns allowing a shopping center conditional use, keeping in mind the restrictions that would be overlaid on top of that? Nope. All right, seeing none, we'll move to veterinary clinic, which I thought was an excellent pickup by Cassie.
So I had a question on that, actually. Did we talk at one point about animal boarding and potential noise related to that? That's the only drawback I see potentially with the veterinary clinic is you're going to do some boarding, right? And is there a potential noise situation going on?
There is a veterinary clinic on the Main Street, and to my knowledge, there's been no complaints from any neighbors or residents. Staff, have you heard of any issues with regard to the current veterinary clinic that's
What's it
along
called?
there? Parish Veterinary Clinic?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the one where it was the old post office building, right?
Yes.
Oh, back behind Maverick?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Behind Maverick?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's fine. That was the only question I had. That was just a question.
No, I think it's a fair question. Okay, seeing no one raise any outcry, going to catering limited. Why is this one, Cassie, is this one controversial? it's currently conditional and it's staying conditional?
That's because I asked her to put it on,
Oh, that's right.
to make sure if we wanted to see if we wanted to put anything from conditional to permitted.
Ah, that's right. Does anyone feel strongly about making catering permitted?
So
Yes.
where's the?
Yes, Logan is nodding for the record.
Where is, there it is.
I still like that one as conditional.
I think if you're gonna go conditional with the restaurants, you gotta go conditional with this one too.
You could have the same smells and
Yeah.
Yep.
traffic and issues.
And parking the food trucks in the wrong spot.
Parking food trucks. Okay, bank or financial institution. Now this one is, it would move from conditional to permitted. And let's, okay, let me ask this. So with regard to bank or financial institution, does anybody have any problems if we removed the restriction on drive-throughs and allowed drive-throughs? Because I think realistically, if you have a bank without a drive-through, you're not gonna have a bank.
You're not gonna have a bank.
That's true.
I don't have any problems with that.
Okay. Gonna make a note. Any concerns with bed and breakfast? So that one is on there, I think, just also to look at whether that is something that we wanted to make into a permitted use.
Which I could see that as permitted,
I actually could too.
but
What did we do with hotels? Just
Removed
curious. We took that off the list, didn't we?
I think realistically, a
because
hotel.
hotel's
under
not
the
gonna fit there.
Limitations,
Well,
yeah.
I know, but I've just,
But a bed and breakfast, I could see working there. I mean, let's actually talk about this one. How do people feel about potentially moving that to a permitted use? Do I even need to look to Logan to
No,
see
yeah,
him
this
nod?
is actually one that I think I could be comfortable with conditional. As I imagine the use, one thing that pops up is I think late night in and out. You know, like with a lot of the other uses like construction, sales, and services, I'm having a hard time imagining these above and beyond things that we might want to mitigate. But with bed and breakfast, you got a little bit of a restaurant type thing. You could have odors, you know, if they had a industrial
Without
kitchen, if they had
cooking
8 or 9
facilities.
rooms, or if you had late night coming and going, if they had late check-in. You know, I could see a few things that I would be comfortable having a conditional use tool on that one.
Logan, you have persuaded me.
There you go.
Would anyone like to counter? I was over here like picking my jaw up off of the table as you were advocating for conditional use
I can't
permit,
be
but.
objective.
Does anyone have any strong objections to keeping it conditional? Any objections? Okay. Cultural service. So we had talked about this one. Cassie had moved it to a permitted use just to be consistent with the way that it is in other parts of the city. That makes sense to me.
that's fine.
I think the likelihood that we'll get a cultural service there is fairly remote. I don't know, maybe interest will pick up in that, but. And church or place of worship, so keeping that one as a conditional.
So what would be the mitigating concerns we'd need for that?
Depending on the religion,
traffic.
you might wanna.
No.
Oh, Logan.
I'd be fine with that one being permitted.
Right now, our ordinance has shown patterns to being underparked.
Oh,
yeah, I think that's the bigger issue there
Yes.
is the parking.
I'm thinking of the church that we were talking about out on that west side. We did run into some parking issues there, and we made it work, but I think that was because it was a conditional use permit.
Are any of the churches in the residential areas conditional, or are they permitted, do you know?
I think most of them are conditional.
Are they most conditional? Or
Maybe
can you
100
tell
or
us for
something,
sure?
yeah.
I feel like they tend to overpark though a little bit.
Because the place down west of the freeway is not the only place that gets overparked. If you go to any popular denomination in Utah church, then you will see that every one of those is also. So it's just something to consider, that we need to make sure that we're equally addressing all of that.
We need to promote that Lime and Bird scooter service in residential areas on Sundays. Because
Yes. Ride your scooter to church.
Church or place of worship is conditional or not permitted in all
Residential.
zones.
All zones?
Well, I mean, there's no permitted
Okay, great.
church.
That's good to keep
So
that
then that's consistent if we
Okay.
keep that one alone. Okay, so by
Thank you.
my count, everybody was completely fine with leaving the list as is. So let's, with a couple of exceptions. So I am going to, for ease of keeping this straight in my own head, I am going to make a motion to recommend to the City Council the following amendments to CZC 12.12 definitions and CZC 12.36 table of uses as set forth in the staff report, with the following exceptions. One, we're going to take car wash off of the list to discuss separately. Two, we're going to take restaurant fast food off of this list to discuss separately. And the third change would be on bank or financial institution to delete the asterisk.
I second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate on that motion, taking those two pieces off the table?
So when would we discuss them?
We're gonna do that one next. I wanna get all of the non-controversial ones through first, and then we'll come back to those two.
So is that with the reasons for action?
Oh, excuse me, Lisa, yes, with reasons for actions A through
I think it's 1 and 2, right, or A and B?
A and B.
And then on business equipment, if we can say rental services, I think it's supplies, not entertainment.
For which one?
Business equipment. I was trying to think what business entertainment was. And
Oh.
I wasn't liking it, but
Business equipment, services, and,
luckily we don't have it.
all right, well, we'll just take it off.
Business is never entertaining.
Okay.
Equipment, entertainment.
Sorry, I just got that one. Okay. Being very serious. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate?
Yes, so how do you, Chair, how do you envision handling this motion to the City Council meeting? In my mind, I thought we'd go with one clean motion up. Regarding the controversial stuff, are you thinking to send two motions up?
Well, what I'll probably do is we'll do this motion and then we'll come back and amend anything that passes so that we're sending up one clean bill.
Which
so
would
why
be
don't we-
appropriate, right, at this
Yeah.
period, right?
Why don't we do this? We've got the motion on the
You know what?
table, and let's make a motion to amend this motion, and then we can,
I'm just going to tell you right
Fair
now, I feel most comfortable with the way that Shaylin has done it because I feel pretty strongly against the one, and so I would not want to vote for the entire based on the one. Just telling you now. So I would love to put up a clean motion that tells all of these things that we support to the City Council, and then letting the City Council know these are some other options that were not supported.
Well, so that's why.
Because I don't want to go up to the City Council and say, Becky doesn't support everything.
But see, that's why we have the motion on the table. We amend this motion, we have our discussion on the individual points, we amend this motion, and at the end, we vote up or down on the amended motion, so that we're not gonna pass a motion that everybody's kind of like, and then we come back to it later, right?
I'm confused.
Well, the way your vote would be counted, I mean, on an amendment, you would vote no to the amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
And then your
Right.
vote
Great.
is counted.
And then at the very end, after we've done all the amendments, we'll vote yes or no on the whole thing as amended, or not.
Yeah, I think there are multiple ways to skin the cat, but that reach the same result. So
And I like Shaylin's way.
The official answer, skinning the cat, is 67.
it's 67.
That's the official
Do you know,
answer.
I have no idea where that horrible phrase came from, so I apologize for using it. Really morbid. Okay, so does anyone want to make a motion for an amendment to the motion that's on the table? Anyone?
Well,
Kevin, car washes?
I don't feel strongly enough about car washes, but I would make a motion to amend our motion to add restaurant fast food without the asterisk.
I'll second it, just to get it up, so.
And the reason for that is, sure, you might say we have enough fast food in Centerville already, and we do have a lot, that's true. But I don't think we want to limit ourselves with that, because maybe, you know, something really awesome comes along and they'd love to come to Centerville, but they can't because of some little definition of how it works out. And we talked about this last time, you know, orders are not taken at the customer's table or generally served in disposable wrapping or containers. They can't come here. I don't think we really want to limit ourselves that way. I think we want to let the market decide what comes here and how it works. and we'll let the people decide.
Any further discussion or debate on this amendment motion? All right, if not, let's take a roll call. We'll start at the other end this time, Commissioner.
Okay, so Shannon,
Wait.
tell
So
me what I'm voting on.
okay, so it's a good clarification. So we are not voting on the original motion. Right now, we are only voting on whether to include in that table of list restaurant fast food without the asterisk
As conditional.
as a conditional use.
Yes.
So if you support adding restaurants with drive-throughs,
You vote yes. And if you don't want, if you don't want if you don't want fast food or you don't want fast food with,
We
we're
can
gonna get into that one separately.
You
So-
could make that amendment.
if you support freedom and liberty, you vote yes.
Okay. All right, so is everyone clear on what we're voting on?
Yes.
All right, so now we'll start at the opposite end, so Commissioner Wright.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
This is a hard one for me because I am a lover of drive-throughs, but I just do not feel like that fits in this area. So I'm gonna vote nay.
Well, that makes it tough for me because I was seriously considering voting nay, but I think that it's a character issue for me, but I think use wins out for this one, so I'm an aye.
Aye.
All right, so that passes. Would anyone like to make a motion to amend the underlying original motion as to car washes?
I would. I hereby make a motion that we amend the motion to add car wash as a conditional use on the table of uses, with the justification similar to what Kevin shared, in addition to the, what should we call it, Hayman justification regarding strategic
I don't think we want that one in.
decision-making.
I'll second
I'll
it.
second that.
Okay.
And
All
I
right.
just want to make a comment. Tonight, we listened to a stakeholder, somebody, a landowner in Centerville that wants to make Main Street great. They want to do something good on Main Street. And if somebody wants to come in and do a car wash, but make it look good on Main Street, because we have some car washes that may not look that great, but if they want to do it and do it right, I want to see them succeed.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Let's, like I've said a dozen times already, let's let people be creative. I do think, though, that a car wash is going to be a tough fit within the design guidelines, but
And it may be, but it's not impossible.
let's let people be creative.
I agree.
So I hear what you guys are saying, but I still look back at the O'Brien property and, you know, at one point in time, somebody wanted to bring in a lot of high-density housing. What happened is that wasn't palatable here in this community. And eventually, we did get some commercial development going in there. So I think if we plan, we may have to wait a little longer, but it might be a better plan for us 20 years from now.
Right.
Versus just the first thing that somebody wants to do. I mean, I think our job is, yes, let's allow as many uses in here as we possibly can. Let's, you know, put some fire into developing Main Street a little bit, but I still just don't think that this one fits. And I think if we hold out, we will get the type of development that will be a little more cohesive and be a better fit for our city long-term.
Okay, I like that. I think that is a good argument, but from the past couple of meetings, there's nothing that's gonna draw people to Main Street other than the locals. I mean, Bountiful's not gonna bring any more, we're not gonna get an off-ramp or an on-ramp on I-15. So I don't see a lot of people standing in line wanting to do something on Main Street. A group came in tonight, and because we tweaked something here, they fit. But before we tweaked that, they would not have fit. And I think they're gonna be awesome. I think they're gonna be great. I just don't wanna limit something that I don't see has a strong commercial demand right now.
Well-
Or we'll have a commercial demand in the future.
But in the same vein, you know, an electric company and a car wash are very different mitigation. They're very different uses, but also very different with the surrounding area. It would affect, a car wash would affect the area in quite a different way than office buildings and people that happen to have a use that is construction limited.
The construction limited is going to serve a very small group of clientele, of stakeholders.
So I'm talking like traffic, I'm talking like noise, I'm talking smells, I'm talking a lot of things that the car wash is going to bring to that area versus just an office space that arguably this construction limited is going to be a fantastic thing for this area. But I think comparing those two is not quite equal. I do think that allowing uses is there, but I don't think that car wash and construction sales limited is equal.
But if you have an owner that comes in with capital that says, I want this, I want Main Street to embrace this, and I want this to fit in, and obviously some people like clean cars. I mean, it's something that there's demand out there for. Renters don't. Renters don't.
I would like for you to make that a joke on the record. Let's make sure we all know that was completely in jest.
I know, I understand the arguments against it. I mean, I understand the argument. I'm just saying, do we want to limit a potential owner that has resources to try and make it fit and try and make it work?
I think that, so for 10 years, we've had our current table of uses and we've had our design standards in place, and for 10 years, Main Street has really not changed. And so by taking this step, we're experimenting, right? We're going to leave the design standards in place, at least for now, and at least, I don't know, if we get to that later, fine. But we're going to change the table of uses and say, okay, let's see if by making this change, we can get some movement here. And I think that the car wash is part of that. You know, if you get somebody who can make it work within the design standards, let's see if they can do it and get some movement. And maybe a car wash comes along, and then somebody's like, you know what, there's some action going on Main Street. I'm going to bring in my secondhand store. I'm going to bring in my escape room. I'm going to bring in my vocational school. Whatever, you know. I think that we just need to hang out that open for business sign and see what happens.
I am persuaded by what Becky said at the very beginning of our discussion, at the very, very opening, which is that, yes, we want to hang out our shingle, but we also don't need to open it for absolutely everything. And I don't think that whether we decide yay or nay on a car wash is going to make or break anything along that Main Street. And if there is one use that we feel a little uncomfortable with, even if it's just for a character issue, because it's not the type of business that we see developing along that Main Street, I am comfortable voting nay. And the car wash for me really falls into that, just in terms of what I see along it. And I say that fully recognizing that I am typically somebody who would like to allow property owners to have more use of their property, not less. But here we're making so many other changes to the table of use that when it comes to car wash, that's the one that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to me. And I, just from a sheer character issue and the vision that we see of Main Street, that one doesn't fit in to the vision of Main Street for me. So I'm inclined to vote nay on that one.
This is my last comment. A great Saturday is filling up my car with premium gas at the Maverick, going across the street, washing my car, and then going to the drive-up window at the Taco Bell and getting a chalupa. That is a great Saturday. And you want to eliminate that.
No, you can still do that.
You can still do exactly what you've done, but we aren't
We're
wanting
just saying
that.
no more of them.
Yeah.
Instead, you can go fill your premium tank at the Chevron, go across the street to the Quick Quack car wash and pick up a Blizzard.
There you go.
Stretching the lines there.
All right. Any further discussion on the car wash amendment?
No.
If not, we'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Daly.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
All right, fails because it's a tie. And so that leaves us with our original, so now the motion on the table is, the only change that has been made is that we have added restaurant fast food without the asterisk.
Correct.
And we
And change
remove
the
car wash.
definition entertainment.
And yeah, and take off and entertainment from business equipment rental services, which is a good pickup there. Okay, any further discussion or debate on the motion currently on the table? If not, we'll start with Commissioner Wright.
Oh, were you going to address the
What?
bank issue?
What bank
That
issue?
was your third.
Did I miss a bank issue?
Well, no, because when
No,
she
I
made the
included
original
that on the
motion,
With the
original
original
motion.
motion.
that was
Oh,
part of her
okay.
original motion.
Yeah, the part of it was deleting the asterisk.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will have just one little thing before I vote. I'm just going to explain again, just so it's for the record and so that the city council is obviously very well aware. I am really excited about looking at these table of uses to try to encourage movement along Main Street and encourage allowing property owners to utilize their property. I too am very much a proponent of giving property owners the rights to use their property, while at the same time balancing the much needed desire to plan for the residents of the city and the needs of the city. And because of that, that was obviously my main opposition to having a fast food restaurant along Main Street, is that this area, to me, is an area that is residential, is commercial, is historic, is all of these other things. And there is a place that I feel is acceptable for the fast food restaurant, which is Parish Lane, and there's plenty of opportunities there. So for me, I'm still strongly against that, but I will support the motion with it included.
So are you an aye, for the record?
Well, and when we're gonna, does anyone else want to say anything? Okay, then yes, aye.
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 Excellent. This was a really healthy discussion, and not just tonight. I want to commend this planning commission for being very thoughtful about this entire process. I think that we and staff have done a really excellent job of, okay, I'm patting myself on the back essentially, right? Like good for us. But I'm really pleased that we solicited public comment and we really tried to engage the public, and we are trying to do something that is going to create movement, positive development along Main Street. So I'm really excited about that. I'd like for us to continue this movement with looking probably next at the design guidelines, right? That's sort of the next logical step for me. And so while we're going to be sending this one up to the city council, and they'll take the time that they need to get their arms around it once they do that, I'd really like for us as a planning commission for the next sort of big bite of the elephant, so to speak, to tackle the design guidelines next. So, good
And
work.
just to further pat you on the back, this was your goal session, and you asked the council, let us go after the use list, and they said, okay. So there was very little guidance to you. You took this matter in your hands and addressed it and sending something on, so good job. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Don't let it die, Corey.
And I'm going to excuse Commissioner Hurst. She needs to take off, but that's okay. So next item on the agenda is the Community Development Director's report. So I'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you. You do only hold one meeting for November, so you're off for the second meeting. December 12th, I think, is your next meeting. There are two items. Sheffield Downs is the Dix Market site is coming in for their final subdivision and site plan issues associated with them. And Legacy Lands had a delay in their soils report, so they were dropped from your agenda. We will re-notice them, it looks like, for your December 12th meeting. So
Legacy
you have,
Lands?
yeah, that's the Jeff Cook out west
Yeah.
by the UDOT sheds.
Oh.
So their lot was a 4 or 5 lot subdivision, industrial subdivision out. It will likely be on your next agenda. If I can skip to the city council report, I don't remember if it was reported to you, so I might be repeating what Cassie, the murals passed at the city council.
Oh, good.
After a couple of meetings debate, so that was interesting. I went in with the Vegas odds that it wasn't going to make it. So it passed. So they've made the application, right, for the sign. It's a good looking design. What is it? Keep it real. Keep it real with some flower designs.
And where is this located?
This will be on this not Center and Main building, but the white building to the north of Center and Main.
I'm really excited for that. I drive Main Street every day, so I am looking forward to it.
I think just the gee whiz golden nugget is Councilman Ince has a neighbor that painted their retaining wall, and he likes the paint on the retaining wall better than the wall itself. And so I don't know how that heavily influenced anything, but it was something that was unexpected in the debate for me to hear about that. They talked about some Salt Lake murals and what might be offensive and not offensive, but it did pass, so that was interesting. Also, the last council meeting, there was a second report for the city foothills property, the 180 acres, the city. The council received that second report from the task group, so you have an existing conditions report, a future recommendations kind of management report out of the task group. That is being sent to the Parks Committee and the Trails Committee for their response, since they are the recreational recommending committees for the city, to look at those reports and bring back some findings and ideas from those committees by February 1st. Then there'll be an ad hoc committee created that will be asking the commission to appoint a member or two to that ad hoc committee. There'll be a formulated draft management plan for the property that committee will create and send up to the city council, and that'll involve some public representatives from the Parks and Trail Committee, some city staff, planning commissioner, city council member or two that wants to be a part of that. So that, I believe, begins in March under their goal. As we're wrapping up the end of the year, just thank you for all that you are serving. Enjoy some of these breaks for the holidays. Enjoy time with your family during the month. Enjoy with your neighbors, whatever you're planning to do with the holidays. Be thinking, it's coming to the end of the year, for chair, your schedule, your goals that you'd like to, that we haven't finished out. Takes a long time sometimes to get through some of these issues, but just be thinking about that as you approach the end of the year. And that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Was anybody able to attend the Wasatch Front Regional Council meeting? I was not able to get there.
We did have Mayor and Commissioner Hensey, I believe Steve was there, and wasn't there a council member or two? Was it Tammy?
Mayor, the city manager, city manager.
City manager Steve. I was wondering if Tammy made it.
I don't think so.
Tammy made it. There was some feedback to that, the gee whiz that I know about the feedback, because I gave the electronic comment section before that meeting. West Bountiful was a little concerned about some of Centerville's efforts on the west side, the Porter Lane crossover.
Yep, that came up.
And some of the uses that they have a concern about still with their west side area.
Yeah, they were against that overpass.
That overpass was an unofficial, they became official. Remember our original west side plan? That overpass was discussed about during that west side plan that did not pass, mainly opposed by West Bountiful residents. That crossover was proposed idea in that plan, and because we did a grant with Wasatch Front Regional County Planning, Wasatch Front Regional Council Planning, it ended up on their long-range vision support. So I don't know how critical that is, but it's something that we probably need to get back to the west side plan and think about.
Was anybody able to attend the Ogden, the planning
Housing Coalition.
Yeah, I
was
felt
not
really
able
bad
to.
because they sent it to me here at the city and I didn't get it until the same week of, so I wasn't able to give anybody very significant heads up, although it looked like they had really interesting topics.
Yeah.
So I'll try to be more in tune next year if they,
Do
you know,
that
send
again.
something so that I can get a more timely notice, because I think that that would be helpful, to have at least one of our commission members attend. Okay, thank you so much. Corey,
Sure.
Cassie, you guys are fantastic.
Guess I did the work.
Moving to, I'm gonna get us out of here before 10, that's my goal. So let's go ahead and move to the minutes, review and acceptance for October 24th, our meeting on October 24th. So we'll do this the same way that we always do this, page by page. If you have any comments.
We should tell her about how they did it in the city council.
How did they do it in the city council?
They were a little bit more expeditious about it than we are.
They just say, are there any changes?
Yes, that's what they said.
What?
That's how they do it.
We are, no, I refuse.
Okay.
Because this is a Dave Hershey approach, and I refuse to deviate from Dave Hershey.
Okay.
So any changes on page 1? Page 2.
Yes, I have one on page 2. Line 12. It says, Commissioner Daley asked about coordinating with the school district regarding, and I would propose deleting the rest of that sentence and replacing that with school boundaries to minimize requests for boundary variances and potential confusion from future residents. So the sentence would read, Commissioner Daley asked about coordinating with the school district regarding school boundaries to minimize requests for boundary variances and potential confusion from future residents. Because that's actually what I asked about. I wasn't necessarily talking about traffic safety, although it's important, but that's not what my question was.
Okay. Any other revisions on page 2? Page 3? Page 4?
One thing, sorry. Line 8. Right in the middle of the line, you have businesses prohibited. I would strike that and replace it with permitted uses. So essentially, we should be removed from the list of permitted uses on Main Street.
Got it. Any other revisions on page 4? Page 5, I had 2. So on lines 3 and 5, it refers to the commission, but I don't think we as a commission ever formally came to an agreement on that. So instead, I would say change the commission to read a number of commissioners or several commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just have a widow orphan, I can't remember which is which, on line 53.
Yeah.
I would push that to the next page. Any other comments on page 5? Page 6. Chair will entertain a motion.
Chair, I move that we accept the minutes for the October 24th meeting as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debates? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. And I am going to move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Really good work tonight,
Did
guys.
someone second that we adjourn?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I can't remember who